There.
Oh, there you go. Cool.
There you go, man. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome. It takes a while for people to trickle in. So, and the vast majority of the people watch this after the fact and kind of at their leisure. But it's wonderful to have you, Fabian.
No,
How
thank
you
you. Thank you.
doing?
I'm doing good, man. I'm just kind of waiting it out, waiting winter out here in Chicago. So, it's like I couldn't tell the difference between like whether it's like below 0 or 5 degrees or 15 degrees. I'm just kind of over it. But, it is what it is. We've got a lot of stuff that we do here in the facility. So it's very easy to lose track of time, which is nice because then when, you can escape the things you don't want, like winter, right? Just focusing on work and do stuff. So things are good. How about you?
Things are awesome. Yeah, it's for people that are watching this sometime in the future. This is February 21st. So we're at the time of year when we're just over it, dude. every bit of why am I do you see me flashing a little bit?
I don't know.
Okay, then that's me. Maybe it's my eye. Maybe I'm having a stroke over here. But yeah, we're at that, like every little bit of sunshine that comes in, we drink it up, and I live in the Pacific Northwest, so we have a lot of overcast days, and it is a pain in the butt, especially around this. It just starts dragging, and then then all of a sudden we get that second winter, right? And it's like that we get a cold snap, and so. But yeah, man, I'm right there with you. I'm excited. Actually, while I'm going to go to Facebook, and that's where I do as I share this on my personal page from my Bow Wow Bill page. And while I do that, do you want to give people a quick introduction, Fabian, about who you are, where you're from, and what you're all about?
Yeah. So we're based in Chicago. So my name is Fabian. I own a company called Found Chicago Boarding and Training Center, and so that's one of a couple of different entities that we have. So in Chicago and pretty much the market, we've have a couple of different things. We have a Pup Start Chicago, which is basically what it sounds like, which is puppy training and puppy development, pretty much from 8 weeks to 2 years of age, right? So that's something that it's a bit crazy, but people do it, and we achieve a lot with the dogs. Then Found Chicago was basically the rescue that I worked with for a long time, that eventually it became a boarding and training center that is under our ownership. And that's where we do all the behavioral cases, the doggy daycare, the doggy boarding. And now, with MOJO Dog Co, that's our retail. That's like our, we're raw food, dog sports stuff. This is our 4th year in business with MOJO. And so we've did a lot of importing products and selling them and stuff like that. Now what we've done is we're kind of slowed down a bit of last year into this year, and we're starting to develop our own products, going into manufacturing with that company. And then with Dog Tribe is essentially going to be our school for dog trainers here in Chicago. So we have a dedicated space that is already finished being built, working pretty heavily on curriculum these days, a lot of curriculum, a lot of training for our team in hopes for, leading into like a late fall or early fall opening for programs. So there'll be some trickle out information on that. But yeah, man, that's pretty much what I do. And I've been doing dogs the last 17 years. So I've spent at this point more than half my life in the dog industry, from doggy daycare, boarding, rescue, so that's kind of what my full-time commitment is now. And then on top of that, I forget on top of that. So I am part of the IACP. So I'm on the board of the IACP. For those of you guys that don't know what the IACP is, it's the International Association of Canine Professionals, focusing on dog trainer and canine professional education, certification, and also awareness for legislation of anything that is like a tool banned or anything of the sort. We're a pro tool organization, right? So there I serve as the vice president of the board and director of oversight for education. There you go. That's our website. That website that Jason Pergerson built. It's a very nice website, actually. I took a look at it, very detailed.
I'll put a link to the IACP site in the comments. And just on a quick note, Fabian, that we're going to talk about you today, but we are going to have a time here in the future where we have you, a couple other members of the board, on one of these live streams, and we'll talk about the upcoming conference that's going to be held in Savannah, Georgia at the end of July, as well as some of the docket items that you guys are working on to improve and to become kind of what would I say, a powerhouse in the dog training industry, which I'm all for, man.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, we're actually heading down to the venue next week. Since right around this time of year, it's a matter of like getting a tour of the facilities, contracts. You got to feed a bunch of people, right? Hundreds of people, and you got to make sure everything is planned out ahead of time. So next week, from Thursday to Sunday, we're going to be there for our meeting and then catching up on conference items and stuff. So, but yeah, man. In short, a lot of dog stuff. That's pretty much encompasses my 12-hour days. Is a little bit of everything, but thoroughly I enjoyed, from the dog training to the manufacturing of products and getting to test them and learning about that, and then playing, doing my part for the education, for education, and honestly like the dog trainer awareness of laws, legislation, and overall the progression of the industry. So we spent most of our lives focusing on that, my wife and I specifically.
Awesome, dude. So tell me, what was the initial catalyst that got you working with dogs?
Dude, so I was thinking about that earlier today. And so, I started working with dogs, right? So I was 16 when I started working with dogs. And now I just had my 34th birthday this last Saturday. Yeah, no, Sunday. And so, I got involved with dogs. So first of all, I grew up in Mexico. So I was there till I was 7 years old, and
Really?
I grew up on a farm. So my family is pretty much a life or generations long line of farmers, right? So my grandpa still has a ton of property. He does fig farming, lots of corn, cattle, and stuff like that. So I grew up around that when I was a kid. Came here when I was 7, and so between 7 and and 16 years old, there were some interactions with animals. Like my dad's always owned horses. He's a little bit of like he's a little bit of like a horse trainer. Like he does pretty cool stuff with them, from like dancing and performing stuff with them, and
Cool.
so grew up with that interest and seeing that. But I didn't really fall into like dogs until later. When I was a teenager, and I remember I was working at a grocery store as a cart boy, like one of my first jobs. And I had odd jobs when I was a kid my entire life. And so when I got my first like paid job hourly, like you get paid hourly, I was so happy, right? Because you can show up and there was predictability in terms of what you're going to do. And I worked as a teenager and summer jobs as a kid, and not necessarily out of like fun, but out of necessity, right? You come from an immigrant family, you don't have like the means, right? So, I did a lot of that when I was a kid. So I worked as a cart boy for a little bit, and I got really sick one time, and I was really obsessed with going to work. I've always been a little bit of a workaholic or obsessed person with the things that I'm doing. And so I remember telling my mom, like, who's going to cover my shift? And I can't call off. And I really want to, like, I don't want to look bad. Like I'm a hard worker. I want to make sure that I'm there. And I had pneumonia at the time. And my mom was like, you're going to quit your job because I can't have my kid. You need to be focused about you're going to school and, your health right now. You can't be focused on going to work. Right. And so, I ended up quitting my job, and I was actually in tears at that time. So like, I remember like my mom put me in tears because I had to quit my job and I didn't want to. And so, that happened, and I spent a couple of weeks kind of like, I don't know, just a little like depressed and sad about like what I wanted to do. And there was a lot of things that kind of came to mind, because you're a teenager, your mom's like, go get a job or do after school things. And I always, went to look for work, but it just, nothing really clicked. So a couple of weeks went by, and then my brother reached out to me and said, hey, I've been, he does folkloric dancing at the time. So like in high school, like part of like dance teams and, being a Hispanic culture, there's a lot of like cultural things, for example, for folkloric dance and that kind of stuff. And so they would practice, and him and his friends would practice at a doggy daycare, right? Like when they closed down for the evening, they had cleaned up the space, and obviously most facilities are big open spaces. And so they would practice dance there, right? And so they all slowly got jobs. The place had just opened. It was 2007. and they just opened. And so a few of the friends got jobs there after high school, right? And after school. And one weekend they were short, right? They were short, or it was really busy. And they said, Fabian, like, why don't you come out and help us with the dogs, right? Because my brother's friends were always like a year older than I was. And so they said, why don't you come out one weekend to help us with the dogs? And I was like, I'm kind of scared of dogs.
Real quick, because I didn't know what it was, man. But here I am looking at the folklore.
Oh yeah, dude, yeah, for sure, 100%.
This is so cool, man. So this is what your brother was doing while the
100%. I did that a lot when I was a kid, and they have a lot of different styles. Like this is more of like a traditional Mexican culture, and then like every part of regional Mexico may have something different, or then you get into Latin America, and everybody's got their own thing.
Love it.
But they were doing the dance, and so they got jobs there, and then I ended up there one weekend, and I remember it was the craziest thing, right? Because you go from like, you live day-to-day life, you have a lot of interaction with people, your friends, your family, and then you walk into like a place, and it's kind of early in the morning, it's quiet, all the dogs they're in the boarding, where we were there pretty early. It's time to go out to potties, right? And then all of a sudden the whole place comes to life, right? Which is like, the dogs are barking, dogs are waking up, check-ins are happening, and people are coming in and out, and the dogs need to go outside, and then the dogs have to eat breakfast, and then they go up to play, right? And I remember going into telling my brother, like, I'm kind of scared of dogs, right? Because in Mexico, when you grow up, like, we always had a pack of dogs with us. You always did. Like, there was just like 4 or 5 dogs that were always around. When I was a kid, you would go to my great aunt's farm. She had like a dairy farm, and she would have the dogs loose, and they would just pommel you. You're a little kid, and they just knock you over, and then you got to fight them to get up. And I remember those experiences. That and roosters chasing me around. That was like, my dad till this day, he brings it up sometimes. But, so innately you're like, dogs are kind of jerks, and they're kind of like this and that. And so,
what's up, Larry?
Hey, Larry. But yeah, dude, so I spent some time in Mexico like that. So when I started working with dogs here, that was a general assumption, right? And it wasn't until I went to get my first dog, and here's a slip lead. He's like, what do you do? It's like, well, just go in there and grab the dog and put him around and bring him out, right? Make sure he doesn't pull you over. And I walked into like 2 labs that were boarding together, like 2 old English labs. And they were so, I still remember, they're so cute, like wagging, like doing that really intense, like, oh, it's in the morning, you're going to take me out. They're just very excited and very, very happy. And so I took him out, and after that, I'm like, dude, like, this is so fun. And I remember thinking, like, people get paid to do this. You know what I'm saying? Yeah. Like, this is like, especially from like a very entry-level daycare attendant, where you're like, man,
how do I get more of this in my life?
Right. So I had my first day there, and it was a weekend day. And I remember leaving for the day, and I was like, wow, that was really fun. Right. I smell like dog, right? And it's been like a wild day, but it was fun. I enjoyed it. And as I was walking out, I remember the manager at the time, she was standing at the top of the stairs, because there's 2 floors. So they would send dogs down the stairs for daycare, and we'd grab them on the bottom of the stairs, put them back in their kennel. And she said, hey, dude, you're pretty good with the dogs. You want a job? Right. And I said, okay, I said, okay, cool. Like, what are my hours? And so I followed a schedule there, pretty much on weekends. And then my high school had work release. So basically, if you have a job, they can let you skip the last period or something like that on your senior year of high school, your junior year, you can do something like that. And so I started leaving there. I would cut school a little early to go work with the dogs. Like, there's like, man, I don't get out to 1:15, but my shift starts at 1, right? So there's some times where I was like, okay, talk to my shop teacher, like, dude, can I like cut school for a little bit so that I can make it to my job on time, right? And so I was pretty dedicated to it. But it was never like a primary focus, right? In my mind, it was like, this is what I'm doing right now. I'm going to school. I had an interest in automotive engineering, automotive technology. My brother now owns, a couple of automotive shops. Like, he's in that industry. Okay. We've always been a very hands-on family. And with like the stuff we were doing growing up, like taking apart computers and doing the whole, like, fixing electronics kind of thing back when it was fairly easier to do. But anyway, so I followed the dog thing for a while. I was really invested in it, but I was going to school, right? I went to the City College of Chicago here. Then they had a 4-year program, a bridge program with SIU, like Southern Illinois University, Carbondale, for the automotive program. So then I did the 4-year program there. And so during the entire time, I was just very involved with dogs, right? So one thing led to another where it's like, hey, we need a supervisor. So I was a supervisor, and I would always step up and just do the thing and work really hard for that. And then we got into the behavior thing. I think it was about 18 years old when I officially started training. And I had started training when I was 18, and I was actually working with a positive only trainer. So I was working positive only, and they had seen me be good with the dogs, and I was supervisor of the facility, and like, Fabian, you're good at handling the challenging dogs. So I actually have a couple of the clients that could benefit from you handling their dogs through class, because I don't want one of the dogs to get loose in class and have a problem, right? So they would hire me in to like do the handling, in terms of training. And I remember walking into that. The first thing, I thought it was kind of weird, but I also thought, I was like, man, I'm stupid and I don't really know what I'm saying and seeing. But I walked in there and they had the barriers. You know how like they had the barriers where they would have one reactive dog on one side, and then you had the other reactive dog on the other side of the barrier. And the whole gist of the class was to bring out a dog slowly into the class. The other dogs would see it, and then they would, if they start reacting, they would pull them back behind their own barrier. Have you ever seen that?
No, but it's like blinds,
Yeah, they're blinds. They're
like
blinds.
blinds, right? But it doesn't, I mean, sometimes you can get some barrier aggression or some, I don't know.
Right.
There's a whole part of me that's just like my wheels start. I haven't seen it. I know that there's some places here. I mean, it's like the HR approach, right? It's
Right.
like the, safe. I get it. Right. But
No,
yeah. Did it work?
No, absolutely not. I mean,
Yeah,
it's in hindsight, it was just kind of like, I could see the intention, but I think a lot of dog training, a lot of dog training, or good dog training, is a lot of the times held back because of people's personal beliefs that have no business in what they actually need to do with a dog, right? And I'm not saying about correction or punishment or any aversive stuff. I'm just saying following a process that ultimately leads to change, right? And if I'm not comfortable as an owner following that process, often my dog will see no change, right? And so there's a lot of that, and I see it in the positive only community, and I saw it back then. So I got involved in that training, and then they hired me to work a couple of the dogs that were there and follow specific exercises, right? It was very clinical, like get the dog out and dogs having resource guarding issues. So put one food in an empty bowl and let them eat it. And then slowly we're going to progressively get to them eating all of the food out of the bowl while you're present, right? And none of that kind of stuff made sense to me then. And I really thought, like, oh my God, I must be so stupid. I don't really understand. Like, I don't see the visual change, right? Like, I just don't see
this stuff
what's happening.
That's what I remember saying to myself, was like, this stuff should be working. And it's not. Like, there's something up here, man, because in fact, like I saw dogs getting worse, right? Or becoming more manic,
100%.
right? And more crazy. And I'm like, wait a second, I'm trying to bring about stability. I'm trying to open up lines of communication here, but I'm kind of pouring gasoline on the fire in a way. Like, this is not, the dog sees the treat and then they like reel through every command they know.
Right.
And I'm just like, wait a second, man. Like, yeah, the dog's showing me that he knows some stuff, but it's becoming this reflexive, rote kind of reaction, and that's what made me start to seek out other trainers and go to the ICP, and that's when we're always learning here. So yeah,
right, for sure. And so during that time, now as a trainer, I've become very obsessed with visual progress, right? Like doing things that are effective, that are going to make progress with a dog, right? And so working with any sort of apprentice or trainers in my department, often what I like to hear is how did the session that we just do make progress with the dog? Because sometimes people get stuck with, we had really good reps, right? We had really good sessions. We had really good. It's like, oh, that's great. If a dog's good at something and you're good at something, you're going to have great reps, right? But if we're focusing on progress, there's a little bit of challenge that I want to hear about as we're getting the dog ready for something else or making progress, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. I did that for a while. And then the owner of the company then, who ended up being a huge mentor of mine in business relationships, finance, that kind of stuff, who owned the company's called State Dog Hotel. So he, at the time, there was a lot of people that would just abandon dogs at facilities, right? We would have occasional, like a couple dogs that people checked in for boarding and just never came back. And
that's wild, dude.
Yeah. I mean, that was, back before you can shame them on social media, right? Now it's like,
it still happens, even if you shame them. Like,
I bet.
I bet. And that's what I tell people is that's the, we'll back up and talk a little business here. This is the importance of qualifying clients, asking the right questions. And then that's where, because sometimes I don't know what's in people's mind where they just abandon this, but they're overwhelmed. They're over their head and they don't know what to do. And so they take the dog to the point where they're going to be benefited in their mind, I guess. I don't know.
No, 100%.
But yeah, so you would get it doesn't happen as much. I take it now, but people will bring them out here, dude. Like, I live out in the country, and then pretty soon I got dog walking down my driveway that's been obviously cared for. They're not skin and bones or anything, but they're, people
that's crazy.
Out and just abandon them out here, and it's heartbreaking, but I take them to a shelter or whatever. So what was the name of this business? The hotel? It
was a Stay Dog Hotel.
Stay Dog Hotel.
Yeah. So they're just down the street for us. And so we'll get into like the whole campus block kind of thing that we got going on here. So, they would leave dogs there. And at some point there was a, hey, George. At some point there was enough dogs where there needed to be some sort of like nonprofit rescue situation to adopt them out, right? And so that eventually, Michael, who's the owner of Stay, he said, hey, let's launch something called Found, right? And so Found Chicago, and it's gonna be like the dog rescue organization. And so, I think I was just hanging around, and he came up to me. He was like, hey, dude, so I need a behavior person for this thing. Like, and I'm just like 18. I'm still in college. I'm like, dude, I think I was like 19 at the time. And it's like, I'm school, I'm like busy all the time. It's like, well, we need you to come in. I would like for you to come in and start up binders and logs and do the stuff that you do with the dogs and be that person for Found, right? Be the behavior person for Found. They had tried to recruit another person, but I think they did maybe like half day and quit or something like that. They had a disagreement and it just didn't work out, which was crazy to me. So then they come to me and it's like, hey, do you want to do it? And I said yes. And so I did that whole, so now it's Found Chicago Boarding and Training Center. Now it's a training center for dogs. And, that links out to our Pup Start program. And we do all sorts of, behavior work and training. So when we did is I worked with that for a long time. And as it came down to like the organization, oh my God, look, it's broken. The link's broken. Yeah, the Instagram link is somehow broken there.
Yeah, is this Urban Weekends? Is that you or?
I have no idea. I think that's just a
dude. I was just like, maybe that's one of your traders or something.
No. That's gotta be broken.
There you go. Make a little note.
Yeah,
broken IG, broken. IG.
No, absolutely. So we got involved there, and I did dog rescue there for the longest time, and I didn't want to get further involvement because I was in a different path. I was doing automotive engineering. That's what I was studying. I wanted to do more of that, and it just kept going where it was, where they just wanted more time, and they tried to recruit me full time, actually, because it was just like a couple hours here. They wanted to recruit me full time, and I said, you know what, I'm in school, I don't want to do it. I actually do not have any value in doing nonprofit work, is what I said. I don't want to do nonprofit work, and just because I've always been a very like business oriented person. I like working. I saw, I had a whole plan for life at that point, and so I turned down the job twice, right? And then they eventually said, "Hey, Fabian, we really want you to do it." And I said, "Okay, I have I think I had like 9 months left of school left." And I said, "I'm going to, I'll take the job. I'll do it for a couple of months to help you get off the ground doing operations." By that time, I had already been in the industry maybe 4 years, 5 years. I'll help you get it off the ground. I'll do operations. I will do the whole thing. And then when I graduate, I'm going to go do something else, right? And so I decided to, at that time I had left the company I was working for. I was working for a veterinary clinic as a technician there. Okay. And I learned a lot. And part of the reason I enjoy mentoring people and I enjoy helping people is because I had been mentored and I had been helped a lot, right? The entirety of like, as an immigrant in this country, by people that helped me learn English, right? By people that helped me, go to school, by, the neighbors. And so I always wanted to, I enjoy mentoring and I received a lot of help. And so basically, I quit my job, did full time. A couple of months in to the position, the organization had severe financial problems, right? Severe financial problems, just as any nonprofit, anybody that's in the nonprofit world, like money is always short. That's just what happens, right? So it ultimately really boiled up to, we had a couple of employees work there, and we had a couple employees work there, and the situation got so bad that we unfortunately one day just had to pull the plug on the whole thing and lay everyone off, right? Lay everyone off, including myself. So I laid myself off, and then, but I just couldn't leave the dogs alone, and I couldn't leave the situation as bad as it was. So I spent 2 months working for free, right? So like, I was just like, I didn't even tell my parents at the time, because they were helping me with the by living at home and stuff. And so I didn't even tell my parents until later on, now years later. But I just wanted to continue working. And the nonprofit organization, we dealt with pit bulls, right? That's what we did. We did about 10 years of pit bulls rescue. The organization would largely focus on, bring us your toughest and your worst cases, and we will take them in and we will work with them. And we did. A lot of my behavior experience and background comes from those 10 years. By the time I started doing sports stuff and bite work and all that kind of stuff, my mind was already kind of like, I know where this is heading, and I've seen these kind of behaviors happen. So it kind of just brought the whole thing together in terms of like how to work dogs, honestly, what dogs are exhibiting. So I did about like 10 years of dog rescue, pit bull rescue. I did it with, and eventually we put a pause on it a couple of years ago, 2 years ago. So it was longer than that, but we were sporadically doing rescue here and there. But we put a pause to it because I just got tired of the dilemmas. You have dogs that early days of rescue, we had dogs that couldn't go anywhere, right? They, were all scarred up. We were working with animal care and control, taking in some of their pit bulls and their toughest cases. We also ran a bunch of pit bull programs and bully breed programs. And so the biggest thing, if I was to say something that I got really, really good at, is getting pit bulls to play. That's like my thing. I can get pit bulls to play, right? In terms of like, even now with more technical skill in terms of like e-collar, with going through different programs, competing and doing this whole thing. Now kind of what I did with the dogs makes more sense to us. And now we systemize that through the company in terms of how we do it and how the process. And I have a couple of young trainers and apprentices really developing and learning that skill, because it's such an, in my opinion, is a very important skill to learn. And so basically spending a lot of time in rescue, there was a time where a lot of volunteers got bit, right? A lot of dogs got bit. There was dogs where like, when you advertise that you take the worst, you literally will get calls from anywhere.
Like, okay.
100%, right? Challenge accepted. And so people would bring their dogs, and there was a time where I was very frustrated with the situation that I was in, because I was the person manning operations, and we had a lot of dogs that, because of nonprofit structures, I didn't have the decision making power to euthanize, right, or to call it a quit to that dog. Right, we had the board of directors had to make the decisions, and ultimately what happened was we had about 5 dogs that were here for several years. I'm talking like 3 to 5 years, because they had bitten people. Or they had really injured dogs, or just situations that are like, you can't really be adopted out into the public, it's unsafe. But we also don't have the desire or belief that you should be euthanized, right? And so there was a big divide of like being no kill, like especially in nonprofit, is no kill. And no kill, I think, is as long as you have less than 10%. At least that's what I was told at the time. But yeah. I think there is like a specific category or metrics that will consider you no kill. I'm not quite sure.
The euthanasia is usually because of health reasons, right? And so they'll put it in. So behavioral reasons do not fall into that no kill statistics a lot of times. Like, I mean, it does, but it's a very low number. And right. I've had this conversation because I've dealt with this as well, of behavioral euthanasia, working with rescues, and our job is that we have to move dogs. We have to.
Oh, dude, that's the business. You're selling, when you're a rescue, you're selling dogs to the right candidate for $250, $300. That's what you're doing, right? It's a revenue. Yeah. Adoption's a revenue.
And when we have a spot that's taken up, like we essentially have a wing or a place that is meant to be fluid being clogged up by one dog that we can't do anything with.
Right.
And not only that, but the life that this dog will live in this facility is not going to be as enriching, especially if they have to be micromanaged every single day, especially if we have a liability aspect of this dog. And that's where we have to have that hard conversation. And I do think that there are dogs that need to be euthanized, and it's a very hard conversation. I get it, because I cry right there with it, right. but and did you learn that? What are your feelings on that? I know this is a touchy one, but
no, not at all.
The worst of the worst, right? Of the pit bulls, of
right.
One of the most popular breeds that we see, especially in urban areas like Chicago. And a lot of people just don't know what they're getting, what they're signing on for when we get some of these high maintenance breeds, is what I call them.
Right. I think that there's a couple of things for me. Is that I like to refer to the Ian Dunbar scale, the bite scale that they put out. I think they put it out several years ago. Yeah. And it paints a pretty good indication from my actual hands-on experience of what a dog's able to achieve during rehabilitation or the training or the risk of injury, right? Because I've seen enough dogs tear apart their other dogs or really severely injure their owners, that to me, it's a bit about like just communicating the information and being upfront in the kindest way whenever you are working with people like that, right? Whenever people are put in the situation. And so my stance on behavior is that if a person has already been bit, the dog, whenever they have another outburst or chance to bite, it would always be greater than or equal to the last bite. It's kind of what I've seen. Yeah. Meaning a dog that bites the forearms because it flinched or it was abused, or maybe it kicks in the prey for some odd reason and bites there. If you get punctures, the next bite that is an accident or something happens, it will be the same or often a progression of the aggressive behavior, right? Meaning that like I will now stay on the bite or try to bite harder or thrash or, depending on what the next step is for that dog. And so I often, when people bring in a severe behavior case, I ask, has it bitten? No? Cool. There's a lot that we can do. There's a lot that we can test. There's a lot of management strategies. There's a lot of things that we can do.
We're up at level 1.
Right. Has the dog, specifically like 1 or 2, which is our near misses. Now we have a level 3 where the dog's actually bitten. Okay, cool. So now we're seriously assessing what we're going to be able to do, right? Because we don't want to have more bites. And most of the time I say, well, we're going to condition a muzzle. right? Condition the muzzle. We have to make behaviors really, really, really clear. And then we have to get into what I call behavior isolation, right? Meaning that once you train all the obedience and all the behaviors and all the toughening exercises, whether you're like a Nepo person or a counter conditioning person, whatever it is, at the end of the day, you will have to do scenario-based training, right? In the least staged possible, meaning that you are not setting the dog up for failure. There isn't any environmental cues that the dog's going to learn and pick up on, that knowing that you're setting it up for something that it shouldn't, right? It has to be the most natural behavior. And you put safety measures, whether it's a muzzle or a second handler or something of the sort, but you have to isolate that behavior, and you truly have to address it or counter conditioning it or isolate it to the point where you can remove it from the cycle of thoughts that it's going to do, right? And it's hard, and that is hard. And a lot of handlers aren't good enough for that. And a lot of trainers are not capable of doing that, right? Yeah. And so, which is why immediately, once there's a dog that's a successful bite, you got to really assess, what is the handler capable of? What are their overall beliefs? Explain to them the trajectory of training, and then we can make step-by-step decisions. Just recently too, I deal with a lot of behavior cases now, because as we're heading into trainer education, our company is the first thing that we want to tackle, right? Before we train students for other people and all this and that, the art team is probably the most important thing. And what I've learned in dog business is that your team of trainers, the people that you work with, are by far the most important asset. Absolutely. What they believe, culture, their overall skill, their ability to do the work is huge, right? Because, you know, when you work with a team, you want to be able to do team exercises. Everybody's going to be at the same time, but also at the same stage of learning. But also, when you have very specific behavior cases that you're working on, people need to understand your processes. But and then finally, there are certain things that just can't be accomplished when you're just not a good enough trainer, right? So if you want very clear technical e-collar conditioning with nice responses and quick behaviors, people have to be good for that. Like, the trainers have to be good in order to be able to deliver that. Specifically, if you're, you know, promising certain behaviors or, you know, that kind of thing. Specific, now getting into behavior work, you know, you want to work with a team to be able to accomplish that, but sometimes you need to assess where the dog's at. And just recently I asked, I stopped the program for 2 different dogs, right? Because I said one of them was one dog, and I won't say their names because it's been so recent, was pretty dangerous, to the point where I said, if I continue working with your dog, like, I've worked with these cases enough, but your dog has exceeded in this behavior, has bitten other trainers, has bitten other people, and has gotten away with it, and now the dog's over 100 pounds, and it's got some aggressive behavior, right? Anytime you try to ask it to do something that involves, I don't want to say pressure, but that involves stress,
being insistent, right? And some type of you're insisting something of this animal.
Right. Anytime you're insisting of something, actual obedience, he growls. And if you say, no, you got to keep doing the exercise, not even punish the growl, not even confront it, but not say, you got to keep doing the exercise. We'll turn around, bite the leash, you know, do this whole thing, try to come at you. And I said, listen, at this time, you are now able to keep your dog here. We have a facility. He loves me because I took the dog in for a couple of weeks to get it to build a relationship with me, play with me, get excited to see me, get excited to see my team. Now, effectively, you have somewhere to leave it because he hasn't been left, and there's family that are sick and they want to go visit them, and, you know, the whole thing. You have somewhere you can leave the dog that has strong processes and protocols to make sure that your dog has a good time and is taken care of. If I continue and I try to address these issues, my experience that with your type of dog, things will get worse, and that may transfer over to our relationship with you. Mm-hmm. And then you will have to euthanize the dog, right? And I just have to tell you that if you're telling me, Fabian, I am not going to keep this dog, and if you can't address it, we're going to euthanize, then I would say, okay, you know, like, let's give it our all. Let's try it. Let's go through the processes. Let's go to the counter conditioning. Let's let it, you know, let's go through a couple of extinction events that are going to maybe change its behavior, right? And addressing it and stuff like that. But if you say, I will keep this dog by any means. And unfortunately, in my opinion, that's what the situation wants. And at that point, I do say, just so you know, this is what I believe about your dog. I do believe you're bodily harm. I just want to say that. I do believe that if the right choice would be for you to rehome the dog or euthanize, but if you're not willing to do that, I can work with you on specific things for you to remain safe and for you to slowly over time leverage your relationship to achieve greater results with this dog, right?
And here's
so
the things to avoid, and here's the thresholds of overwhelm that we do not want to put our dog in, especially in the presence of you being here, right? So
because I've seen it with pit bulls that are game bred and they have been in the fighting ring, and I've seen it with I've seen them really maim someone's foot. I've seen dogs scalp their owners, in the people need plastic surgery and their face is not the same because they did something with a dog and they bit their nose. I mean, something like that just happened recently. It was on social media. I've just seen a lot of that.
When you see that stuff, that gives you all the more importance that you need to stress to your team. It's like, dude, this isn't
100%.
This is not playing around, man. Like this can alter your life forever, right? And not only that, but I've been bit where I've almost had to be put in the hospital for a week on IVs because they thought that the infection from the bite went all the way down to my bone, right? And so, we're not playing around here, man. This is a pretty big, especially when we're working with these dangerous dogs. We have to know what each other's doing, and we kind of have to know not just the next step of you as a human being, but what the next step of the dogs and how to put protocols in place that are going to keep all of us safe. And it's not about what we can achieve all the time, but what happens when shit starts to go wrong? What do we do, right? And I wish we had a simulator, right? And I was thinking,
dude, don't even get to that because I think about all that stuff.
Yeah, and that reminds me these camels that are ridden by those kids. Have you seen those camels in Sahara?
I mean, I've seen videos of that, but I've not seen that specific video.
Well, that's basically what it is they put a box on the back of a camel, and then they didn't want the kids being camel jockeys in Saudi Arabia.
Right.
And so what they did was they figured out how to make this box, and people drive the camel by having the box hit the camel strapped on. And so I thought, man, we got to have a box on our leg, on our left side where we're typically walking the dog, and I want a taser in there, dude. And so in a virtual reality, and then when that dog turns and you correct that dog like a simulator, I want you to experience consequence. I want this dog to turn and bite you without having you get hurt. You know, and that's kind of off on a tangent, but dude, that's what we need.
It's true. Right? No, it's true because people are brave. People are brave, and
they're stupid too, dude. And they're stupid. Like sometimes I'm like, "What are you doing, man? Getting your face right down there by that dog?" I've seen too much to know that we don't. I mean, whatever. Sorry, I don't want to start going.
No, it's okay. No, it's okay. I was gonna say that's true. I actually thought about going back to school, and that would be if I was gonna do a software development or some sort of a master's program in technology, it would be something like that. But I'm more business management these days, in specific to coaching. But you're completely right. I mean, my whole stance on euthanasia and behavior, it's just when you look at things through a technical lens and you kind of just see people walking in a certain path with a certain dog, I think it's our obligation to say something, right? Hey, these are the dangers of it. This happens. And when it comes to trainers that have not been bit, because if you get bit once you end up in the hospital one time, and you know what it feels for canines or teeth to go through your flesh and that deep tissue puncture. And then because that happened to me, I think I was 21, and I'll tell you a story. I was 21, and there was a bunch of volunteers coming into the rescue, right? And people were doing, lo and behold, all we had was pit bulls, right? So pit bulls, and some of the pit bulls would jump up and down. We have Mason kennels in that area at the time, where the Mason kennels, I think you guys haven't seen them before. It's a pretty nice fancy kennels that we had purchased, and there's no lids on them. At the time, that model didn't. So there was this dog that volunteer was coming back with a pit bull to put him away. And then one of the other pit bulls somewhere else in the facility would just get so agitated and essentially jumped up, climbed out, and went after the other dog, right? And went after the other dog. And so then
in the other kennel.
Yeah, no, not in the kennel. He jumped out of the kennel into the main housing area and attacked the dog. So now you have a volunteer with a dog on the leash, and the other dog on the leash is in the pit bull's mouth. And then you have two dogs. And by that time, I felt like a badass at the time, right? I was like, man, I got the pit bull stuff down. I was 21 years old. I went over there and very quickly gagged one out because I discovered gagging the dogs off through need. And it wasn't until bite work years later, I'm like, oh, this shit's normal. Like, people do this all the time. Yeah, you just lift them off, you know? And it was so much more effective than bite sticks. I have people try to use bite sticks and put their fingers in, you know.
Bull, dude, I've had somebody put a shovel in when these pit bulls were latched on each other. Yeah. And I don't want to get too gory, but the guy's prying the shovel and the dog's teeth are coming out and he's not letting go.
Oh, bro.
Right? Yeah. They're a different animal, man. Like they
Dude,
don't have lockjaw, but they're strong as shit.
They're just strong. They're just strong dogs, and they're tenacious. And some of them, not all of them, but you know, some of them. And you know, I've seen people put fingers in them. And another thing that I've realized watching people go through traumatic events through nonprofit rescue of animals is they get into a certain mindset. Some people go into full paralysis. Some people, they default to like punching the dog, and they don't think. People react, right? People react. And so anything that I teach with dog socialization and some other technical training skills, I focus on people's reflexes, aiding them by how they handle the leash, right? So so most people like cinch up and pull and do other things. So I always try to predict what people are going to do, because in those situations, they get into, I mean, you don't know what people are going to, they don't know what's going to happen or how they're going to react until it's there, right? And so, long story short, I got in there, broke up one pit bull, told them pull the other dog away, lifted them off. 3 seconds later, they're separated. Put one away, cool. Put the other one away. It feels like a great day. I remember this. I was like, that was easy. I've gotten good at this. I went in there to check on one of the dogs. I went in there to do the medical assessment, make sure no one's injured. And volunteer's good. First dog's good. Grabbed them and checked everything out. Second dog, which was in the kennel next to them, also went in there, took a look at them, and checked them out, finished the medical assessment, went to walk out of the kennel. The dog next to him must have heard him or something, jumped up and tried to bark at him through the kennel, and then got a hold of my right arm. Like right, I think there was a like scar here, and I still have my punctures 1 and 2. And the dog wouldn't let go of me, right? So I was there. It almost felt like the cartoon where, you know, someone puts their hand in the water and then the fish, they come up with a fish. That's literally how I felt like for me. And so I had to get the dog off of me. And I don't remember, but I kind of remember putting my knee on his throat to get him off of me and like choke him off. And I got out and I was like, you know, that's not a big deal. Nothing happened. I'm going to try to go eat lunch. So I had like chicken pad thai or something like that, with some noodles, and I'm trying to use the noodles to like scoop in my mouth, and then I couldn't move my fingers, right? Like I couldn't move my fingers, and in that moment I was like, God damn it, I got to go to the hospital, right? So I was gone for a couple of weeks. The board of directors was real mad at me, and they made me this poster child of like, he had a big ego and look what happened to him, right? And they were right. I mean, in hindsight, I'll do that to these guys, right? Like, I do not want to see that at all. I mean, after that experience, I went through several weeks of like, I had surgery. They had to do treatment on my tendons. I had IV antibiotics. I was out for a couple of weeks, and I was depressed because I wanted to work and my team needed me and I wasn't there, and the whole thing, right? So, you know, as time went on, I then had to deal with several weeks of like PTSD. Like I was just like, oh my God, anything was like the dogs, the pit bulls. I couldn't touch the dogs. I couldn't. And, you know, I finally was able to recover from that and got back to it. But I got back into it with a more of a clear mindset about what animals can do, right? That was like a 45-pound pit bull. It wasn't even that big, right? And it's
Yeah,
usually
dude.
like dog fighting dogs weren't big to begin with. They're small, right?
No,
They're
they're
small and drivey.
and very muscular. And can you,
Right.
you're sounding a little blown out. Can you move your mic down just a little bit at all?
Is that better?
Yeah, I think that'll be
Okay.
better. But
Yeah, I could just watch
yeah,
that.
yeah.
Um,
But yeah, and people, and I'm not necessarily a believer in this, but there's a subreddit, and it's called Ban Pipples, right, or something like that, and it's not for the faint of heart, man. But
right.
it is everyday people having some problems with these dogs, dude. And just like in that bite scale, right, we have some real problems with getting to the level of where this dog can
Right.
potentially kill you. And I think of what, on average, like 7 or 8 people are killed in America, by their dog that they own, or maybe not that they own, but I've had some instances where, I mean, it's and that's level six. Victim is
They
killed in
killed
the first
somebody. Yeah.
instant, right? Or and that's automatic.
Yeah.
Euthanasia destroyed the animal, but um, you got to know what you're doing, man, and we got to come into situations with our eyes wide open and
Right.
not romanticize this stuff. And I think that's what happens too. A lot of times is like, I see these a bumper sticker, who saved who, and I want to be the savior of this dog, where it's like, dude, you got a lot of work to do on
Yeah.
yourself, like, in order and not make this dog a surrogate for the own therapy that you need as an individual, man. Like, I've seen
Right.
some of the most unbalanced people, and this is another reason why we were talking about people abandoning dogs. Like, this is another reason why it's important to qualify your clients and know what you're getting into, because there's a lot of crazies out there that are
Right.
misappropriating the love and affection that they dump on this dog, and they inadvertently kind of reinforce the behavior that's become to this, like, real problematic stance, like level 3 or 4. This dog has bitten multiple people, is puncturing skin, um and now these people really shouldn't have had this dog to begin with, man. Like, it's crazy out there, and I feel for people. I love people, but there's also situations that I'm like, dude, I gotta pass
Right.
on this situation, man.
Right.
It's just not a good fit. And I like the fact of you saying that to your client, like, here's where we are, and you're in bodily danger. Like, I have to address this. Like, there is a percentage that I have to acknowledge here, that this dog, absolutely, we live in a world of chaos and order. And if you happen to encounter a chaotic situation that you can't control, this dog has the propensity to turn around and strike you.
Right.
Right.
No,
Or if you don't
100%.
know how you're handling the dog in a certain situation, and the dog construes that as you being that insistent, uh, then we have a problem here. And so,
Yeah. And the thing I was going to add to that is that it kind of happens everywhere. The second handler was also a handler for a working dog program, for in the state, and they were having problems with this Malinois. And it's the same thing. I mean, the thing is, like, if you have a certain dog of a certain caliber, you have to evolve to match the skills. And the tragic part is that the dog tends to grow and develop skills faster than people can attain the new skills to control the dog, right? So versus like one of the things I love about like
I love it.
protection training, you know, one of the things that I love about protection training is that you really get a chance to practice your skill, like true artwork of dog training, right? And that's the only time where, say, my next puppy that I'll raise for protection work, I have so much of a training plan to put together to work, and I'll enjoy it. But at that point, the dog's catching up to my skill, right? And the things that I want, from shaping to luring. I've raised several other dogs. I mean, in the last couple of years, we've had, I don't know, countless Malinois and Dutchies come through, either for programs or veterans programs, or dogs that we kept for sport and, other development. So I know a good criteria that I want. And so I can really focus on, like, building the dog and coaching the dog versus a lot of the pet dog training and a lot of the people that you're helping. It's like the dog requires certain skill that the handler is going to struggle to attain, right? And if you have a new sport uh, handler and a new sport Malinois, often the Malinois or the dog gets better
Yeah.
before the dog, and I see it all the time, like through our clients
Or you just don't know
stuff.
what to do when the Malinois or the Dutch
Yeah,
or whatever exhibits this behavior, and how do we correct it to get them right back on this path of like, no, dude, I don't mean bite everything and everybody. I mean bite this person in this situation. And
yeah,
now
dude.
when you bite, it's not like just bite this and then guard it. It's like bite it. Now let it go from me. Now bite it on the ground. Now bring it to me. Let it go from me. Bite it on
Right.
the ground, let it go right there. Like there's a lot of different scenarios that people, and I gotta let's go to the comments here real quick and then we'll get into protection stuff. Ingrid says it's an emergency. You never rise to the amazing level of a trainer. You always lower the highest level of your past experience, right? And so you can't just this stuff isn't just like you don't get it by osmosis, man. Like you need to put in scenarios that you can let the dog kind of be your proving ground, right? To show the dog that you know what you're doing. Or
Yeah.
the dog
I mean, I think,
you.
especially here in Chicago, because everything in the city is accelerated, right? Like everything. I mean, we're in the Chicago River is right outside of this window, and we're in the north side of Chicago. A lot of dog training, a lot of dogs. I think if I on Saturday morning when like we're at the second floor of the facility and we look across the river to the park, what you see is literally 100 dogs, most of them off leash in the center of the park. Corner Park is one of the biggest parks in Chicago. They have the dog park. I mean, it is like a lot, right? So everything is accelerated with the volume and demand, and so people can't rise up to the occasion of what they need to do. So often those are the exercises that we have them practice, right? When we're practice people recalling their dogs in the e-collar, where we're practicing the dog. I'm even like owners really struggle to climb. This is something I started doing recently, right? Owners really start yeah, there you go. So that's the that's the river across the street.
That's cool, man. I gotta come check you out, dude, because I've never been to Chicago. I want to go out there and I just want to. So this is a park that you see people. So their dogs are all off leash. This isn't an off leash park, is it?
No, dude, no. I mean, Chicago is like, Chicago's like, I don't know. I mean, it's too big to police everyone, right? So they got the guy with the gun down the street, and they got, drug dealers in the, different areas of the city. They got other fish to fry. So often the average dog owner here and, gets away with it because it's like, what are you going to do? Stop us? Yeah. Right. That's literally the mindset of the owners. And, I don't have a feel for it one or another. I know there are laws and I know that dogs need to run. So it's like a combo. In my mind, it's like, this is just what happens when you cram a bunch of people and a bunch of animals into a city. That's just what you're going to have.
We're free. We're free, man. Like this is a love about America is the fact that we do have an independence type of mindset of like, don't tell me what to do. But you got to realize that there's consequences for this stuff, whether, and if you choose to get a high powered, high maintenance dog, you're going to have to learn how to handle that animal.
So
and off leash.
So the thing that I wanted to mention is that, so what I have my owners do is grab their e-collar, zero it out. And on the couch, like when they're at home hanging out, zero it out, and then put it out of sight, turn the dial, look back at it, and guess the number, right? Okay. Then drop it back down. And I said, just rinse and repeat it. Practice the things that you're going to need because people do need to climb levels and they need to bring them down. I mean, when people deal with certain e-collar brands like Martin Systems, I know people have their complaints, but some of the features I really, really like about the Chameleon and the Martin Systems, and every collar's got their own. We use a lot of Mini Educator, and
that's
the main one that's very easy and accessible for people. But anyway, I feel like we veered off a little bit. Do we have a cutoff time? Do you know?
No, dude. Okay. And not only that, but we can continue this. But what I do want to do is if you guys do have comments, I got a couple more comments to get to because they start backlogging, right? And so that I want to make sure that people know my dog gets frustrated when I don't reinforce commands. Okay. Yeah, sometimes that's where you're
That's a whole episode right there.
Yeah, totally. Then we got to look at the learning pyramid. Always help in intermittent, and then when we are at that place of the pinnacle where we're, the dog is on reliable voice commands. Sup, Fabian? Sup, Donovan? Good to see you. Interested to hear what seminars you have planned for this year. We can go over those. So I'll write down here seminar review. But I want to get to the point of what you were saying just now. And then we have people that we have the across the water here. And then good to listen again. Great. Thank you for being here. Arm and Hammer. And speaking of hammer, no, just kidding. We do have to dial up that e-collar sometimes, right. And we want people. And what I tell them too, man, is like, don't worry about the number. Worry about the reaction you're getting from your dog in that moment too, because sometimes you're going to look at that number and be like, "Holy shit, I was at a 60 or whatever," because the dog, whatever's drawing that dog's attention in that moment. But I'm a huge fan of e-collars, and I've had every single e-collar. Now, I don't work with the cheap ass China Amazon ones. Like, I just refuse it. But you bring me a dog, you bring me a sport dog, you bring me e-collar tech, you bring me Martin system, and I know every single one of them. And I feel like that is even a Garmin. I feel like that is my as a professional. That is my like, I have to have this prior knowledge in order to help you out, and I want to meet my clients where they are, and I have clients that have a CTT4 Martin System $2,000 collar right now with their dog, and some people can afford that, some people can't, and I let them know, just like your Mercedes out there, all the quirks and features that Doug DeMuro talks about when he does these car review videos. Like, we have quirks and features with some of these collars, and some of them are pretty cool, right? But regardless, you're hiring me to help you with your dog, and so let's hit the ground running. What do you have? What equipment do you have? What equipment do we need? Where's your comfort level at with all this stuff? Because even if you don't want to use e-collars, I got you. Like, we have always
100%.
Why you're hiring me. So dialing up the e-collar, I'd continue what you were saying, or finish what you were saying about that.
Yeah, I mean, I think that I don't know. I guess this all comes from, like, when you spend a lot of years in the industry, you just pick up on certain patterns, right? Whether they're habits of people with dogs, like a dynamic between dog and person, within breeds, within a specific breed, the personalities, because there's a handful of personalities within the pit bulls, right? I know every dog's unique, but there's really, like, the lazy one that won't do anything, the high drive one, and the one that's kind of in the middle, and it's like, wow, everybody should have you. And all breeds have that. And so when you're really doing the training and you're going through things, that in some situations when you're training with an e-collar or any sort of training tool, there needs to be events that are memorable to the animal when they're ready, of course, because you're the professional and you can predict what the outcome looks like whenever that doesn't happen, right? Just like when you can predict the outcome when you use tools in a way that flattens out dogs and your timing's off and you're not a reinforcement. Just the same way that, kind of like to the comment they mentioned about, dog being frustrated because of reinforcement. You look at patterns, and certain breeds just get frustrated. Certain breeds just anticipate food and are so driven by food that if you remove food, they start leaking and expecting it, right? There's a lot of those patterns that you see. You see that in Malinois a lot, specifically. A lot of high drive dogs do that. Yeah. And so, I just kind of radicalized a bit in terms of what I view in dogs. And so sometimes turning up the e-collar is something you have to do. You have to make certain things memorable. Just like when you're, the first time that a dog's learning a competition heel and the dog picks up his feet in such a beautiful fashion that you're like, wow, that's amazing. I love that. Tell the dog that it's amazing. Give them food. Yes, food. Yay. Make it memorable. Like, they need to know that one was different. Yeah. Right? They know that one was different.
I tell people that all the time, man. Like, your dog's doing it, like praise in action. Don't wait
Right.
till this is all finished. Like, mark that, especially if we're trying to get to that point, right? And even if you're relatively close, be like, dude, we're almost there, man. Like, there's just something about communication of affection, right? And same
Right.
thing with negation or being upset with that dog. Like, dude, knock that shit off.
Right.
And people that don't know, leaking is when a dog is
Right.
containing. I know we have most people are professionals, but the dog is so excited, and you can almost see and all this
Leaking enthusiasm.
leaking enthusiasm that comes out in
Right.
chirping, whining, barking. Like, there's also that time when the frustration can come out as a demand, like, feed me now. And sometimes even with Bart, like, feed me, fucker. That's kind of
Dude.
what we want to channel. It's
Yeah.
actually a good thing when the dog starts to exhibit that stuff. So
Yeah.
this is a
Until they
whole
do it
podcast.
all the time, and then they want to beat you
Yeah.
up because you haven't done it enough, right? Yeah, no,
Yeah.
that's So, in my career, I've been fortunate and unfortunate. Unfortunate at the time. I was telling my trainers earlier today, I was like, guys, like, I wish we could just like start a whole nother rescue and put you guys through trenches of years of this kind of stuff earlier in your career, because you're going to learn so many skills that are really hard to teach, right? Because you just need to learn them. And like, that's just something that you know needs to happen. But I've been fortunate to learn those things now, because it provides clarity. Like, it provides clarity, and that allows you to, like, if you're in the dog business, and this is what I feel like a lot of dog businesses struggle with, as I coach and I've mentored and I consulted for other companies, is that leadership really has to know dogs. If you're in the business, leadership has to know dogs. Because if you don't, there's that little thing of like, how do we handle this issue? How do you write policies and procedures for companies and organizations that deal with animals when the people running them are basing it off of against what their professional beliefs are, or even their own beliefs, right? Instead of like what the animals need and what the people need to succeed. And I think that that's what I've learned, kind of being now at the business ownership level. And I was once an entry-level technician in kennel tech, like seeing that big gap. And that's what prompted us to start Dog Tribe in the Academy. It's like, we want to train trainers, but before that, we want to train people, dog handlers and dog trainers, and like get them through the entirety of the process, But
Leadership must know dogs, dude. That's what I just
leadership must know dogs, dude. And I see it over and over again. And as I've gotten better as a trainer through like protection sport and PSA and behavior work and the nonprofit stuff, I've just revisited a lot of policies. And also, as I've become a better coach, I've learned what people can absorb and at what rate. That's the cool part. Because when you're a young manager, or you're early in business, or you start a business and this kind of stuff, and you don't really know, what to expect, you just write policies based off what you know, not what is true about people, and not what is true about dogs, right? So when you start learning about what's true about people, how they learn, how they absorb, proper coaching methods, and then you pair that with good processes and good coaching and training about animals hands-on, and then their education side, you can write policies that make sense, right? And that's something that's really cool, because I see a lot of people see the chaos of like the dog world, and for me, it's like I just see things that are unrefined, right? Like, I don't see chaos. It's kind of like when you train enough dogs, you're like, this dog is not a bad dog. He's trying to do the good thing, but it's not learned the behavior that you're trying to cue it for.
Yeah. In
right?
fact, he's learned behavior in such a way that you've inadvertently cued it for, and that's why it's become such such gasoline, right? That's why I learned Nepopo. Was I don't do sport dog. I've never done it, but I mean, I appreciate I've handled some sport dogs. I've never competed myself. Maybe someday I will, but now I know exactly why and how my pet clients have gotten their dogs so freaking crazy about pulling on that leash, by charging the door, by being reactive. And so the more knowledge that we have, and I agree fully, like, I agree fully too, but I also want to invite people out of the dog world into the like project managers, especially,
Mhm.
and people that have this engineering mindset. I want to invite them into the fold of the dog world to
Oh
learn about
yeah,
dogs, right? Because they have a different, like we've been kicking down the can down the street as far as like this rescue and the animal shelters, all this stuff. Like there's a way that we can innovate. And dude, in 1996, there were 50 million dogs. There's now 90 million dogs in America alone. So
yeah,
right there, that growth pattern, look at that. That growth pattern by itself suggests that, I mean, this isn't going anywhere. In fact, we are hitting the almost a parabolic
oh 100%.
trajectory, right? And so how are we going to meet the needs of the demand in a way that is fulfilling to the animal, to the dog, and form successful businesses that uh, are truly beneficial to the communities that we belong to.
Right, right. No, for sure. No, I mean, for me, it's definitely been a journey, and kind of like picking up on the story. I did nonprofit for a while there, and then eventually, things didn't go well for the nonprofit, and then I worked for free for a while, and it was pretty much like those times where you're like, when is this going to end? When is it going to get better? And there were so many years of that. Like, when is this going to get better? And who knows? And I got to the point where we got better. That's where they asked me, what can we do to substantiate revenue? Because you're not adopting dogs out because you're holding on to some. And then the other ones, they brought them here because nobody else wants them. That's the fact, right? And so I said, why don't we offer, hey, Michael Bishop. So I said, we're offering these services and we're caring for these animals that are very dangerous for free, right? What if we charge for this service, right? Like we're better than some trainers, we can help people. We just, at the very least, we can board and take care of animals that, that other people can't. And so we started Found Chicago Boarding and Training Center. And that was in the end of 2011, beginning of 2012, as a method to drive revenue for a nonprofit. And I really loved that model. So that model was kind of my idea at the time, where you can have a nonprofit organization hold a for-profit business as an asset, and then transfer cash flow and build cash flow. And it's great when it has interest. And so that went well for a little bit. And then obviously, just because as anything grows, you have people that were passionate about nonprofit, and then people that are passionate for profit. And then the argument between, we're working to pay the bills and you guys are just not doing a good job. And they're like, dude, what are you supposed to do? It's like the whole infighting kind of thing that just happens. And so ultimately, yeah, right. So things didn't fall apart. They ran into another situation where there was just not enough revenue coming in to substantiate everything. And I remember sitting there, and I was already, I think at the time I was 24. And I've been working in the industry for now quite some time, and have been involved in these projects, this nonprofit projects that turned into like a couple of months into like years long of helping this organization that was constantly struggling. And we had good times and bad times, had a lot of lessons learned. And at that time they said, hey, we're going to run into another financial situation. What can we do? And at that point I was like, honestly, I just can't stomach bad decisions anymore. And I was pretty rude with the board at the time. And then in hindsight, they probably looked at me and they're like, there's an ambitious young man that is just frustrated with the shit. Maybe that's what they thought. Or maybe they thought, look at this freaking kid who's being an asshole to us and thinks he's better than whatever. And so I said, you know what? I'm happy to buy the for-profit entity from you guys and close the nonprofit. Or I'm gonna go do my own thing, is what I said. I'm gonna either make a bid to buy it or I'm out, because I feel like I'm doing a lot of work, and I don't want to piss you guys off, and I also don't want to live angry. So I don't want to live angry. I don't want to make you guys unhappy. And so I said I'll make an offer for the organization, for the for-profit company of the organization, and the for-profit assets, including the name and the assets that was currently being held. And we went on a 1-year journey of back and forth battles, from trying to make payroll to trying to, me helping and working for the organization, and then board members that didn't want to sell, and then eventually working with everyone, and eventually everyone approved. I mean, there was just one or two people that were just not quite so happy about it.
Yeah.
But I said, I hate to put it this way, but I was the person holding it together, and I was the person like, I kind of twisted their hand and twisted their arm into doing it. But that's also a business lesson, like in terms of people, in terms of like accumulating value, being really good at what you do, like all that kind of stuff. But at the time, so I had, I bought, I had living with my parents before college, and we had saved up some money, and basically I bought a 3-unit building in Chicago back in 2015. Yeah, I think I bought my first
10 years ago.
10 years ago. Yeah, I bought my thing 10 years ago in February 8th. Yeah, February 8th. So over a little just 10 years ago. And I don't even know. Wow. Now that I think about it, like the 24-year-old buying a 3-unit property is just like, what the hell were you doing? Right. So I took out a business loan against my property to then secure the funding to acquire my business. And then at that time, I made a conscious point, because with my wife now, Brittany, helped me sign for the documentation because I was still on the work permit, so I could buy things. But during that time, so her and I are married. Obviously, it worked out really well for her. I'm just kidding, for both of us. But no, she's great. I mean, Brittany. If you think I'm a dog person, Brittany is that like little girl that was 2, and she said the Labradoodle is 24 inches at the, she's been like, totally she's that person. There was a random dog breed on Instagram that looked like a golden retriever, and I thought it was just like a hulky golden retriever doing bite work on the sleeve. I think it was in one of the bigger IGP pages, and she's like, that's not a golden retriever, it's a blah blah blah, like some weird fancy breed. It's in between the golden and the Saint Bernard or something like that. And I was like, what? I don't even know what that was, but that's who she is. So we bought the business together, and that's Brittany. She is incredibly talented. I mean, she is so talented with the training. She balances me out, because historically, like when I was started training rescue dogs, I went from positive only to a lot of like, straight up just yank and crank, right? Like old school, like choke chain, prong collars. I ran a pit bull class, and my pit bull class day one was people were walking in. This is me, 22 years old. People walking in as they're walking in with we call them screaming pit bulls, because they scream when they see other dogs. So people were walking in with their screaming pit bull, that's what we call them. And I would just be hanging out prong collars, right? Someone's coming in, here's your prong collar, you're coming in, prong collar. And lesson number 1 is, in like 10 minutes, I want you to get your dog to stop barking at other dogs, right? I mean, it was the craziest thing. Pop. That's where, that was my background. After being positive only, I immediately went to like, the dog's going to do it. And the sad part about it is that once you get to know that you can get animals to do things, doing those practices, and you can do it pretty quickly, once you get past extinction events and all that kind of stuff, it becomes a default, right? And I trained like that for years. And then Brittany was always like, I don't like training this way. And over time, we brought it all together. And my forte is, as much as I am really good at marking and shaping, and at least for me, because of sport, you just have to, if you're doing sport, you have to be good at these things, right? It's everybody that does it. But I became really good at negative reinforcement. Like with either a leash or a prong collar, because there's so many years of that, or with a knee collar, reading behavior, reading stress levels, bridging one thing to another. And I became really good with that with coaching people, because I believe coaching people need a little bit of negative reinforcement, depending on who you are, right? Yeah. Depending on who you are. One of my apprentices now, he's a little bit like that. And I don't bully him, but I'm like, I egg him on, and I push him in a way that gets him to think, and he responds, to do things. And there are people that are the exact opposite,
Shit and marshmallows. Sometimes you need to stir a little shit in their marshmallow, and some of the times you need to put a little marshmallow in their shit. That's the talent code. That's what
do it 100%. It's that balance. And I think, so I was at the Silver School as a GM when I was a GM in last March. I think it was last March.
I was
And they
supposed to be
said,
there. That's when I got pneumonia, dude. I've never had pneumonia in my life, and I come back from Costa Rica,
yeah,
and
dude,
bro, like I thought I just had the flu, and then they're like, "Freaking no, you're not going out anywhere." I was in the hospital for like 4 days, 5 days,
bad
and
deal.
all these IVs and
Oh
the
wow, so it was
the
bad,
Pope
severe.
has double. I'm Catholic. I don't know. You're from Mexico. You Catholic?
Yeah, definitely Catholic from
Yeah.
first communion to confirmation.
Me too, brother. And so the Pope is double pneumonia right now, and they don't think that he's going to make it. So I pray for a
Oh
good death
wow,
with a good Catholic. I don't know if you knew that,
wow.
but Pope
I
Francis
did not
is,
know that. No,
yeah, currently. So,
wow.
um,
Um,
but anyway, just to let you know, as a fellow Catholic,
yeah,
but
yeah, yeah. No, for sure.
um,
Um,
yeah, I had pneumonia when in last silver school, and then they actually were kind enough to um, put the money that I paid for that silver school and just forward it to the one in October. So that's where I went to the one in October.
got
Um,
it.
but what were you saying about that, Fabian?
So, yeah, because when I was there, they asked me to speak a little bit about like uh, the NEPA and the negative, positive, positive, and in my mind, or negative, positive, depending how you want to break it down. I really talked about kind of how it's like that about everything, right? Like unfortunately, I am a negative reinforcement person, and I'm desperately trying to fix that now as a 34-year-old man. Is like you gotta develop better habits, because I'm really good at the time crunch. Like if you have problems in the business or in an organization, I'm your guy. I love it. Right? I'll get in there.
Right, under
What are the
pressure.
issues? What are the problems? Where are we at? Let's model things. Let's just make some decisions and get going. Right. But if there aren't those environmental pressures, I have to put myself under pressure to like do other things. Right. And there are people that are not there that are not like that. It's the same thing with dogs, right? It's some dogs are like great, they're great students. Other people require, and other dogs require a little bit of like the pushing. Understanding those things is really, really important. But kind of getting back to the story. So, when we acquired the business, I made a conscious choice at that point. I remember telling Brittany, because I'm like doing, I think it was like, I don't know, calculus 3 or something like that in school. And I had spent a pretty much rough summer, like just trying to get through math classes, because apparently when you do math credits and there's like a 5 credit class during the summer, you're doing like math like
Crunch
30,
down and
yeah,
yeah,
40 hours a week. You're
yeah.
working and then you're doing that, and then you got math for the next foreseeable future. And so I was really tired of that, and I basically had a conversation with Brittany over the phone. I remember that, and I was just like, I'm going to change to a different degree. I'm going to do automotive technology engineering. It's like a hybrid thing. And because I was trying to pursue mechanical engineering and the whole thing, I really wanted to go in that direction. And I said, let's do dogs. But if I'm going to do dogs, I'm going to do it all the way. Like, I'm just going to go after it 100%. Like, I have a vision for this company. I have a vision for this company. I have a vision for what we're doing. And, we kind of just took it from there, So a lot of the things that I wanted to do, a lot of things we're doing now stem from that idea, right? I had like my little notebook from like, we used to take notes and stuff like that. And there was a thing that I read the other day. There was like open retail segment to the company. And it was like 2025, or not 2025, 2015 or 2016, where I wrote that. Now looking back at it and seeing a store, like a 2,000 square foot store on campus, I'm like, man, that's dope. Like it's like the power of like writing something down, and even though it's years ahead, the execution of it is really important, right? Taking daily steps to get to that situation. And so we've been going after it with there. We kept the nonprofit. We had a nonprofit for a couple of years after that. It was called Canines and Company. And Canines and Company, we seized it. I think I filed the last tax return for it in 2021. And we just got burnt out. We needed to take a break. And I said, one day, if we can afford to 100% donate annually a large sum to a nonprofit or start a program, let's do that instead of being in operations. Because, there was a situation here where they asked us to take in 2 pit bull puppies, and we took in the pit bull puppies. They're like 8 weeks old. They were like, skin and bones, like just what you normally would see. And they were left at a vet. And then the vet asked us, hey, can you take them in and we'll cover vet care, right? So I'm like, cool. That's a no-brainer. We house, care, develop, adopt out, train them, make them happy, and you cover the vet care. That's a easy peasy. But what ended up happening, they made us take the dogs and then pay for the vet care, which was crazy. At that point, I was like, in my mind, I was like, I'm just gonna take them back to the vet clinic and give them back because that's where my headspace was at that point. But my wife said, no, let's take them in, and they were cute, and we love pit bulls, and we love pit bull puppies, and so we took them in. We sent one of them home in the foster, and we said, this one's weird. It likes to eat things. Do not let her eat anything. Okay. Fast forward a couple of days, dog took in, ate some stuff, and the owner, the foster lied to us, and they said the dog didn't eat anything. It just has diarrhea. So then it hid it from us for a couple of days. We checked up on it, and then all of a sudden they were at the ER vet, right?
Blockage.
And there was a blockage. The dog ate something. It destroyed a bunch of his intestines, and this was during COVID. So
necrotic. That's what happened.
Necrotic.
Or it gets torsion, and like it cuts off the blood supply, the tissues start to die, and you
I don't really know, but I'm betting that's what it was. It's either contortion and then tissue loses blood flow, starts to die, or if it like tennis balls. The reason we banned tennis balls from the facility is had one of our years ago, maybe like 10 years ago plus, there was a dog that one of our trainers' dogs ripped open the tennis ball, ate a piece of the tennis ball, and when it gets in, it expands, and then as it's traveling down the intestine, it's just gouging the lining of the intestine, right?
Oh yeah.
So
totally.
that happened to them twice, which is crazy to me. So they took a couple pieces out. A couple years later, did it again. So for this pit bull puppy, it destroyed a bunch of the intestines. So, and I had nonprofit. It was a nonprofit dog, and so went to the ER. My wife met them there, and she called me. She's like, "It's gonna be $8,000 to save this 8-week-old puppy's, or like 8 to 10-week-old puppy's life, right? And it's gonna be like $8,000." And and then the foster at the time was like, "Oh, I got my golden at home, so I gotta go. But I assume you're gonna euthanize it, right?" And my wife was livid. Like she was a person that was like, she was livid. I mean, I was angry too.
Yeah,
I was angry too. And unfortunately, fortunately for the dog, I just could not euthanize a dog because of the mistakes that other people make. I could not do that. And then, it's like $8,000, and I'm like, oh, my heart, like this freaking lady, made this mistake. We told her not to do that. She did it anyway, and this whole thing happened, and blah 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 blah. So now the dog's in the ER. $8,000 later, we take the dog back because I didn't want to hospitalize it. They're like, maybe it needs to go home, but if you want to keep it here, it's gonna be another $2,000 something to keep it here, right? To overnight to take care of it. So my wife had gotten COVID during the time, so she was sick in bed, and so now I'm doing the things. I went to pick up the dog. I brought it home, and then the puppy wouldn't eat. So once, I guess when you take the intestine and you cut a piece of it off, I guess what happens is that you essentially shuts off the memory or something of the intestine.
Yeah,
so even if you stitch
enteric nervous system, right? And there's actually a parallel of neurons that are tangled around the intestines, around the heart, and around the brain. Same in the animal. And once you get in there, you actually sever that communication parallel between all that stuff that's supposed to work properly. But go ahead.
Right. So it wouldn't eat. So they needed to kickstart the intestine, right? So they gave me these drops, and so I would feed the dog, and then it would just sit there. Like, it was so sad, dude. It was skin and bones. I remember seeing this puppy, and I had already like started getting COVID, because my wife. So like, I'm wearing a mask. My wife's sick. This puppy, I'm looking at it, and it's like sitting in a wired crate, looking at me like, bro, I'm so hungry, but every time I try to eat, I vomit, and I'm just skin and bones, right? I'm looking at this puppy, and I'm like, God damn it. Like, and I literally said to myself, like, I need to drop what I'm doing and take this dog back to the vet so they can restart his intestines, and they can put in IV fluids or whatever it's going to be if it's got a chance at life. And so we went back, paid another $2,000. Dog was there for a couple of days. I then picked it up, and while my wife and I had COVID, we rehabbed this puppy at home. And then we adopted the dog out. It got better. Dog's name's Buttercup. They call her BC, Buttercup. She's a client.
Nice.
She got adopted to one of our clients here. She's a client. She did great. After that, we're done with rescue. I'm like, I can't do it anymore.
Dude, I'm done with rescue too, man. I mean, there's so many experiences like this that I'm just done, man. I tell Bill, I don't have the emotional bandwidth anymore. Like, it's all used up through my experiences since 2007 of working, and primarily that's what I worked with at first is rescues. And I mean, I shouldn't say dumb because I'm working with
we help a lot of rescues. We partner with them, and we choose one, and we take their hard cases, and we love doing that, and we cheer for them and what they do because we've been there. But in terms of like running your own rescue, it's tough, man. It's tough. And unfortunately, I mean, you see some of the worst things in rescue from,
the human condition to the dog condition from these like, especially now, dude, with the horrible economy. I mean, it's not horrible, but it is for some people. Some people are really having a hard time, especially with this fentanyl shit. And especially up here in Seattle, you're in Chicago, so a bunch of these big urban areas, and some of these people have crazy ass dogs, or they have dogs that are being neglected. And remember, like, people have the pie in the sky idea of like, oh, I want to have my own rescue. I want to go out and save all these dogs. And it's like, that's where you have to remind them, like, look, dude, you're moving dogs. This is not a mom and pop candy store. Like, this is a business that you need to think about logistics, how to get these dogs in and out the door. When the dog is not going out that door and using up all these resources, like, you're paying to go to work. First and foremost, you need to know that with the rescue, you're paying to go to work. Like, this is something that is going to take a lot of your time. You're not going to have turn a profit. And I mean, if you're a nonprofit, like, there's so much to consider. And that's why we see such a high degree of burnout.
Dude, 100%.
And, Heather Beck said it once where I was talking with her, and she was like, do you know what? Because she got out of rescue and chose to get into training. And she was like, I wanted to put myself from underneath the waterfall to above the waterfall. And I'm like, makes perfect sense to me, man. Like, because that's literally all you are in this rescue, is this waterfall of what's next coming at you. And you might as well have some semblance of control of what you do, how you plan the future, and how to get there and help others and help dogs.
Right. I just actually took in yesterday, I took in a German Shepherd puppy. He's a year old. Just turned a year. Owner just could not handle the dog. It's not handle the dog. I mean, see, the dog's got some reactivity issues, and the owner lives downtown, and it's like 4:00, thousands of people on the street, dozens of dogs all at one time, right? And she's like, hey, I love this dog, but like, let's be real, right? Like, I'm smaller, older, I don't want this. I made a mistake, and I don't want to send it back to the rescue. Do you want to take it on? I'm like, yep, we'll train it. We'll do an amazing job with it, and we'll find it at home. And, for us, it'll just be like, who's the right home for this dog, and, play some. But yeah, so, kind of getting back to the story. So we intentionally did all the programs and stuff like that. And then we got involved in protection sport, and I got involved in protection sport almost immediately with, I think at the end of 2015.
What made you get involved with protection sport? Like, what was the catalyst of like, whoa, this is interesting with me? Like, I remember the dances in the doggy daycare, right? And now we're evolved. We're kind of in our own business. We've learned some lessons. Like, you've gone through the rescue. You're like, okay, I'm figuring out what I don't want to do. What made you want to do this?
Right. I think at that point, the business. So we've had a wait list for boarding and training programs here since February 2015. Awesome. So we've had a wait list for services for about a decade, right? And so now with a bigger team and stuff like that, we're probably about a month and a half out. During summer, it's longer, but kind of focusing my time on skill development. Look, I mean, to be honest with you, I wanted to sell police dogs. I'm like, that looks kind of cool. That looks kind of cool. I want to get into sun detection. I wanted to get into bite work. I wanted to understand all of it. And so I went down and got my first German Shepherd from Courtney, I think a Global Canine.
Okay.
Down in Tennessee. So I went to get my first German Shepherd there. I had already been doing a some decoy work. And my whole thing about joining a PSA club, because this is not how people do it, right? I was like, I want to start a PSA club. And one of my clients was like, I got this person to go to. And there's like, you should go out to Kankakee and meet with Mark Harwood, right? He's got a PSA club there. And I'm sure some people here know Mark Harwood that maybe listen to this. And so I didn't go. I was just like, it's just too far out, right? I was just like, I'm not going to drive an hour and a half. I have dogs here and facility here, and I'm going to do it. And so I just went online and filed a club with PSA, which is the Chi-Town Canine PSA. I thought that's what you do. You're in Chicago. You just like you want to sign up for something, you online, you sign up. And so I started the Chi-Town Canine PSA club, and I started working some dogs and, doing some prey work and taking some advice from other trainers. And then I really wanted to like learn more about dog selection and puppy selection. Right.
And which is huge.
Because puppy
fundamental.
100%. And so that was like kind of the thing, because I needed to help some people find dogs, and people were asking me. And in the city of Chicago, there isn't a lot of resources for Malinois. And, it's one of those things that like most people are, unless you have the bed and the environment to develop a lot of skill, they don't have the skill to train to a certain caliber to achieve certain things, right? So people were asking, and we're training dogs, and hey, can you help me find a dog, or can you help me work my Malinois? And I'm like, I'm not really at that point yet. So I started getting help, and there was I started searching online, and I ran into this guy with kind of like a country accent. I don't say like Southern accent because he's not from South. On YouTube, and he had these little Malinois staked to the floor outside of his trailer. So he had a big black trailer, big truck, and he had a pit stop on the road and staked out a bunch of little Malinois. And those things were crazy. I'm like, my German Shepherd's not like that, right? And he's just sitting there like just chilling. These little Malinois were wild. I mean, they're like bark, 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 and on like stakes on flat collars, right? And they're like, that's a whole different type of animal, and I love it, right? So then I looked it up, and it was Mike Settle with Logan Haas Kennels.
Okay.
Right? So Mike Settle with Logan Haas Kennels. And so I've been there now a couple of times, and I just recently contacted them about some questions about some breedings. But Mike and Megan were there. And so then I went to their puppy shaping and development program there. And if anyone, I mean, I don't know if they run them anymore, but that is one of the most impactful trainings I have ever done in my career. It was training with Mike and seeing the desire, the conditioning process, and the training for with Logan Haas Kennels. And that must be a new website, because I don't think it was. I mean, I haven't been on their website recently, mostly through socials, but
looks great.
I asked him recently, and like, dude, if I had a chance to send my team somewhere, it would be to West Virginia, to the, up in the middle of nowhere, to Logan Haas Kennels. By far, such an amazing experience. And, so I went there, and it had such a huge impact in terms of proper shaping, right? Like, we're talking like proper shaping, truly being, a Skinner box and scent detection and shaping behaviors with puppies. That was a big thing with, for me. So I learned that, continued practicing. Then, after a couple of months of implementing some of the things, I looked out for some more mentorship. And that's where I reached out to Sean and Janet Edwards. Are you familiar with them?
I'm not, man. I'd love to know them.
Oh, Sean and Janet. I mean, Janet is a 5-time. I should know this because I introduced her at conference last year. It was a 5-time national champion for PSA. PSA 1, 2, and 3.
So she has a PSA 3 dog. Okay.
She's got multiple 3s. I mean, I think she might have 2 level 3s. She's the director of judges for PSA too, I think. Director of judges for PSA. So Janet, Sean is a longtime decoy, national select, emeritus, I think Hall of Fame as well in terms of decoying. So back in 2016, where they started running their decoy camps or the decoy schools, that's when I started going to there. And so, it became obsessed with like a lot of like going around, learning, implementing. So I spent pretty much like 2015 to 2015, 16. Yeah. So like 9, 10 years maybe doing that kind of stuff and just talking to people. And I mean, getting dogs, placing dogs, adopting dogs out, rescuing dogs, like all specifically in the shepherds, and luring and shaping and running my PSA club. And, PSA. Um, um, I mean, most people in the sport world were probably familiar with PSA. But I spent a lot of time doing the PSA decoying, building the club. I think at the time, Jonathan Katz, who is a PSA 3, multiple PSA 3 dogs, maybe.
Yeah,
I'm not quite sure. He left. So he was in Chicago and he left. He was out on the East Coast. Yeah, he left.
Now he's down in Texas.
Now he's down in Texas. He's got the school, Dogma.
Yep.
And, I've interacted with him briefly at national events or other things, but he had left Chicago. And so there was kind of like a void to fill because out of nowhere, I started the Chi-Town Canine PSA Club just because, you could do it online. So I did. And then I started getting hit up with all sorts of people, right? From like people that were older dogs and Malinois, and they really provided me the experience to decoy a lot of dogs. I mean, there was club days in the early days where there's like, I think there was like 27 dogs to work that day. And I'm like the only decoy. And dude, I would be so bruised up and so sweaty. And we would start, and then we would train. I was like, I'm crazy. I'm going to do Mondays and Wednesdays. Wednesdays and Sundays. So we would do Wednesdays from like 6 p.m. all the way till midnight, sometimes like 12 o'clock, 1 a.m., then go to bed, wake up, go to work, do the training. Sundays pretty much all day, right? It really turned into that. And some of those are the most valuable, more years of dog training because you really got to train dogs to standard. Train dogs to standard, which everyone, in my opinion, everyone should do at one point in their career.
Well, I mean, let's talk about standards for a second. Like, and why they're important, man. I call standards checkpoints in your relationship with your dog. Like when you play video games or something, and we have a checkpoint, and then whenever we die, we're right back at that checkpoint. So why do you say that? Why train to standards at least one point in your life? There's Jacqueline joining us. What's up? Congratulations, hey, Jacqueline. Yeah. Congratulations on your new.
Yeah, Jackie's on it. Jackie's on it. She's on fire these days, getting stuff in the education. But in terms of training to standard, what I mean is that like there's got to be goals you can meet with your dogs that can only be met if you follow certain approaches, right? Like that's just one thing. So I think I call them training objectives here at the company. So the facility, we have something called training objectives for every single program, right? Depending on the needs. So anytime we do a behavior program, we're like, that one, we want to have a good marker system, understanding of pressures on and off, and then we can fill in the training plan in terms of what we want to achieve with the dog, right? When it comes to training objectives for other programs, it's like at day 5, these are the metrics we want to see. At day 10, at day 15, at day 20. And so the evaluation and assessment process has to be pretty exact, right? So a dog comes in for training and we look at the dog. I'm like, happy, strong lab, pulling the owner into the building, wanting to say hi to everyone, wants to gnaw at your hand for food, wants to interact with things. I'm like, perfect candidate. Like in literally like 4 weeks, your dog's going to be good, right? Like solid. But we can say that about that type of dog. It adjusts differently. So if a dog meets certain criteria, these are the goals that can be achieved within the time frame if you follow this process, right? And that's what I like about measuring objectives versus a lot of times, and this is what's crazy to me. And I said this at, I think, one of my podcast episodes or earlier on, which is like dog training is the only industry where you can pay, get almost nothing, and no one can tell. Like the owner is just like, some dog trainers are just so good at just like, I'm so confident about what I'm saying that the owner is like, you must be right. Here's the money. And then they get back and they're like, this is actually the dog's dumb or the dog can't learn or, you have you're doing bad. Like when I tell my trainers, if I hold the leash here and I say, right here is our heel command, right? And I'm standing next to the dog's in the cot looking at me and engaged, and I have food in my left hand where it's going to walk. And I say, right here, I need the dog to leave the cot, find his position next to me, and take the food. Right? Second, if I add pressure with the low level pressure on an e-collar, as I'm priming the dog, I need the dog to wait for the command. If I add the e-collar and the dog changes behavior, changes position, or does something else, the dog has adopted the e-collar as a cue and not a neutral pressure, right? So those are like, I mean, we're crazy here. Jackie would know, she's been here before. We're like insane about this stuff because, I mean, in my mind, we're not insane. It's once you see it and you know there's a process of training people to be able to do this and dogs to be able to do this, it's a different story, right? Because you can put them through education to be able to achieve it. But, you know, that's one test. If I add pressure, low level pressure, you know, I know some people are not a fans, but, you know, I find the benefit of it. Add pressure and I say right here, and the dog's in the place, the dog needs to find this right here with no food. I remove pressure, the dog's there, or remove pressure upon commitment. If I add pressure there and I send them back to place, I don't want to have to help the dog. Context is really important. And so we do that. We teach dog people how to do that here as our trainers. We then teach owners how to test for that. Like, I need you to tell the dog to do things and it will do it. That's a metric. That is like training dogs to standard. It's like, if a dog is capable of doing it, you should be able to say it and the dog will do it. If I say place and then the dog doesn't place, immediately the dog doesn't know it. In my mind, if no distractions, I say place, the dog doesn't do it. And then I start doing something like this. I lean, I pull on the flat collar. I start introducing slightly pictures closer to the picture that the dog might understand. And in that situation, yeah, and then I'll find out where he's at. It's like, cool. So your dog understands this. Take these 3 steps to back chain or, you know, fade so that you get the response at cue, not at this plus cue, right?
Yeah.
So, but that's what sport teaches. Like, if you're going to send your dog, you know, I just recently showed Lobo in the 2s for the first time this last summer. You know, I wanted to have gotten him the 2s already. I just didn't have the time to hit the trial field enough. And, you know, I send him over. I'm like, over, tunnel, guard. Okay, if I want to pull him back to me front, you know, send him back to guard. You know, and Jerry Bradshaw was the one that he was the judge at regionals last year. I really enjoyed his surprise scenario, which was send them. There's a decoy distracting on the left. Send them through the tunnel, over the hurdle. After the hurdle, immediate down. Then from the down, do a remote sent to guard. And then from the remote sent to guard, you're going to tell your dog to bite, and it's going to be an 8-second passive bite. And then you're going to out guard and recall your dog back through the obstacles back to the heel. Like, you can't do that unless you have clean training. You just can't. That's a PSA 2 surprise scenario by Jerry Bradshaw. You know, and that's without equipment. Obviously, Jerry's like, this is the first time I showed it with Jerry, and in my opinion, he's a hard judge. You know, I lost a lot of points. My dog did all the exercises, but didn't pass because I just lost points, right? And that's just what sport is. It really pushes you to develop skill to a technical ability in a clear standard, right? And once you implement that into training, like a lot of the arguing with other trainers, or a lot of the arguing with trainers or things like that, just start to go away, because there are just things that you can create goals towards. I want my dog to walk nicely on a leash, and I want the dog to know the difference between free on a leash, and it can pull me everywhere. And when I cue the dog from free to right here, it needs to give me quick responses, right? And so those are standards and objectives. And I think it's very important for everyone to do it, because I've seen, at this point, I would say I consider myself a part-time trainer, right? Like, I'm like the specialist where, at 5:30 Central Time, one of my trainers texts me. He's like, hey, there's this very specific resource guarding case that I needed consulting on. Can you take a look at it with me? And I'm happy to do it and coach her through it. And that's kind of what my go-to thing is now, is as we build teams, is be there as the resource.
Yeah. Smart.
But, be there as the resource. But that's what I teach them, is train dogs to standard. It's possible. And they've never trained a sport dog, but they're amazing trainers. I mean, I'm really impressed. And I've seen clients here in Chicago be so thorough with the instructions you give them, and so clear with what they do, that they've done things I've never seen. Like, how did you take your little scared, nervous dog and have it do tricks and do all these different things? Well, I followed what you said. And I was like, that's crazy. Right? Like, how did you get this is specifically a Rottweiler. How did you get your Rottweiler to stop fighting and attacking your fiance's 2 German Shepherds after it's been aggressive and attacking dogs for, 12 years of its life? And she was like, you know what? I did the muzzle conditioning and I followed your process and I delivered corrections when you said, and I put on the e-collar and you know, I wanted to her name's Lisa. I wanted to have her in an episode of her podcast once. I'm like, clients are so good at following instructions, better than some trainers. I don't know if it's, you know, so but that's what I mean. Dogs to standard is sport teaches that, you know, and if you can't meet the standard, you don't pass. It's just simple.
To me too, like I see dogs just being sold short of their capabilities, man. And this shows people like, dude, just like that surprise scenario that Jerry did for you. It's like, man, like how do we work together as a team to get this performance that is such a high level that we see the potential of this dog, and it takes a relationship and the not just the commitment that you have for that dog, but also the understanding and how to curate what's present within that animal on a high level. And I think that takes the relationship to a next level, man. It's like, it's a bonding experience. And now the dog has really earned the positive reinforcement because, dude, you're really proud of that animal.
Dude, 100%. And I think a lot of those, they seem very unachievable to a lot of people. Like I remember when I used to be on Instagram social media and I would see what other people were doing with their dogs. I would think that that's not like, oh man, I'm so far from that. But the reality is that you need a good dog, a dog that has drives, right? And you need to know how to condition your dog. And so part of the board and train programs now is we're building an online academy for our trainers for our clients. So the clients can follow the training as we're doing board and trains and stuff like that. So that's a massive project we've been working on for a while that we're now towards the ends of it. And my first video is like, here's what dog training is. Like dog training is a conditioning process that you are following for your dog for the short term to create long lasting results. That's just what it comes down to. Right. So I know you may be frustrated or upset that you had to leave your dog, or you may feel concerned and you may see your dog say like, you know, we have very regimented processes with it that has to earn his food. But you got to remember that this is a conditioning process. We are trying to take your dog and give it skills, and that requires proper conditioning, proper understanding markers, proper understanding of training equipment, proper understanding of working with a trainer, working relationship, and then being able to transfer those skills, right? And so in my mind, that's what it all comes. We now communicate this to the owners, you know, that most advanced training or advanced concepts only improve fundamental skills by like 5 to 10%. That's like a quote I got from, I think, a book called Mastery. And meaning that most of your work is foundation skills. So if you can't meet those goals, it's not because you're not a creative person or you don't know advanced things to do with your dogs. It's very likely it's because you don't know how to condition a dog or an animal to do things. Because when I went to Mike Suttle's farm, everything's on the routine. They can recall the goats and they can recall the ponies and they can, you know, feed the chickens a certain thing. Then they shape their puppies. You know, one of my friends, Patrick, who's out here in Illinois, he sent me a video. I think he was like shaping and recalling his like hamster, or not gerbils, hamsters or guinea pigs. Guinea pigs, right? Like he was like, yeah, dude, if I recall them and I'm like shaping a recall so I can take them outside and put them on the ground for a little bit and then call them back to me and whatever. Yeah. And, you know, so
behavior, like we're working with behavior.
Yeah, 100%.
Like even with human beings, like there's a certain noise that I can make with my dog right here. I mean, and it's repetition. Repetition is the mother of learning, man. Like, and not just repetition, but consistency too. Like we have to know and present a kind of not really sterile, but in a way, yeah. Like it's just being consistent and know what that looks like, and and having people eyes on you that can help you know, like when you're making mistakes too, like, and being humbled to the fact of taking on criticism.
Yeah, man. So I've had the experience to work with a lot of people. Kind of before I get back to the story, like, you know, working with two people that really picked me apart. And were good motivators. It's Oscar Mora, like my buddy Oscar, and my good friend Joe Sanante, dude. Okay. Those guys, I mean, if you can tolerate them, they will. If you can tolerate their coaching, if you could get rid of your ego so they can coach you, you'll learn some good stuff with them. I mean, they've, you know, I think Joe's been at it like, I don't know, I don't want to quote him, but over 25 years doing this kind of stuff. And so he's at the sport level, and his dogs are sharp. And so we got some compliments here at the facility from him where like, he's like, this is the only time I've ever seen dogs like this has been out of my own place in California. And I was like, wow, that's huge. Yeah, so, you know, sport has really taken me to a lot of different places, meet a lot of different people. You know, obviously, you know, and everyone should do it, but it does come in phases, right? Like when I was like 25 to, you know, early 30s, now I'm getting into my mid 30s. That's all it was. It was like day and night sport, day and night, day and night, day and night, everything. I mean, we were doing bite work during the day, then training client dogs, and we're doing this and doing that, and so there was a time for that. But now as I focus more on education, my family, you know, you can't ignore everything forever, right? So focusing on the facilities and stuff like that, I wanted to take a break this year. So last year, I think it was 2 years ago, I tried to take a break. So I think it was April 2023. I tried to take a break, and I was like, cool, I'm winding down. My dog's showing in the ones. I'm just going to focus internally in the company. Pre-PSA, because there were some things I really wanted to do here, like the Dog Trainer Academy, the other things. And I decided to go after it again because I met one of my friends now, Scott, who's like came into Chicagoland. He's like, I want to do this. And, you know, I want to, we sold protection dogs for a little bit, did some protection work, and then, you know, got involved back into BSA for that year. And then I refocused last year, and now phasing out for probably the next year or so in terms of like focusing on the company, the school. I'm really excited about Chicago things and being able to host different events and pass on some of the information and you know, knowledge that we built over the years is kind of what I wanted to do. So it comes in phases. You know, I tell my, you know, our trainers here, some of them that are younger and I want to be decoys. I'm like, do that now, like kill yourself now. Like you're 23, 24 years old. Like you should be in a suit every day, drive out, do this. Oh, you're working 10 hours. Cool. Spend another 3 or 4 afterwards doing X, Y, and Z. Like just do it now, because this is dog training. Just like a lot of other professions, is a skill acquisition game, right? You become really skilled. One of my senior trainers that has now been here over 5 years, that was actually one of my first and most recent apprentices. You know, they're heading into a next chapter of their life, and they were kind of mentioning to me like, cool, like, hey, what are we going to do next? And I'm like, you know, it's a little bit of like, you're good at what you do. So kind of whatever, you can participate in these programs or that programs or et cetera, because you've gotten the dog trainer skill down. And the dog training skill, like being good at training, is step one. And Jason Pergerson, ICP president, mentioned that last year, is that anyone that's starting to start in dog training and do dog training, step one is you have to get good at it. Just, you can't really train dogs until you're good at dog training. And sometimes people don't like it when I say that, but I know, because that's what happened to me. That's why I got involved in sport. I wanted to sell police dogs, but I also wanted to make sure that my clients weren't just the ones that were saying I was good with dogs and training dogs. I wanted to have peers that were also skilled that can say, hey, I validate your skill. You're good at what you do. I wanted to, you know, like prove it to myself that I was a good trainer.
Yeah. That's what's attracting me to it too. Like that's where, like the next chapter of my life, I think I'm going to take on, you know, a PSA dog. And now I have you, I have John, I have so many people that I can, from the very beginning, even Mike, that and there's just something attracting me to it. And I think it's also important to have, like you have the Pup Start, you have, you know, the MOJO Dog Company. Now you're building the school dog tribe. That there's other aspects that can take your focus as an entrepreneur personally. Like that's what I like. I'm a glass artist. I'm a dog trainer.
Yeah.
You know, there's lots of stuff, like, because sometimes you're just not feeling it, dude. Like, and that's where it's, you know, it's good to have that. I mean, yeah, that's how I feel, you know?
Yeah, no, for sure. I think that's a, you know, by nature, I wish I can say that all of this was planned. And a big part of it is vision. Like we at some point will rebrand. At some point, we will rebrand everything we do with Dog Tribe, right? And we're heading that into the next couple of years. There's a bigger idea around what we're doing that, you know, I'll probably announce later. But sport was a big part of that. And, you know, a lot of the things that I had to do and learn was because I needed to, like getting started. Anybody that wants to get into sport or get into the dog stuff, it's like get started and find the right person. Yeah, but like learn to deal with things that are uncomfortable, because what I tell my trainers and I tell my team, because they're not all trainers, sometimes they're like people that are building office development, are
Yeah.
developing programs or doing office work, or management is a huge in terms of teams. It's um, things aren't always easy, right? So don't give into the easy and don't give into the successes. Stay in the middle. Take your wins like you take your losses. Like nothing. Just keep going. Focus on the objectives. Those can be time for celebrate personal accomplishments, but focus on that, because it's like, it's hard to make progress, specifically when you get into like dog sport and you feel like, there's insurmountable challenges to get through. You kind of need to develop that passion to actually want it and actually do it, because getting a dog on the field to do well is a personal accomplishment in itself. It takes a community. It takes a lot of money. It takes getting along with people so they're willing to work your dog, right? And decoy for you. It takes being good with people and paying for seminars so that you have the right information. It's a lot. It's a personal accomplishment, right? There's a lot of challenges there.
Dealing with failure, just like what you did good, you did all the exercises, but you still failed. And I remember Will down in Texas, dog training is my passion, was talking to me about how many times he's failed, and all this effort, all this stuff is still no guarantee, man. And so I love that. Learn to deal with things that are uncomfortable. Amen. Because life,
dude, I mean, it. I'm sure there's
dude,
personal challenges.
Of course, and that's why another reason why I'm Catholic too is now we have a higher power that we can appeal to, or also just allow. And I was just I was with my church group last night. I was talking with my priest, and it's like when I pray, I just open up my heart to allow God to give me the strength to endure whatever He sees fit for my life, or give me the fortitude, whatever it is that I need, to not always be the one who thinks that I'm in control. And that's uncomfortable, man. Like there's things that are coming down the pipeline that are not going to be all rainbows and sunshine, and you have to figure out a way to persevere. And so, I love that, dude. I wrote it down. Learn to deal with things that are uncomfortable.
No, for sure. But yeah, man. So that was kind of like the short version of the story. I mean, there's been so many challenges and stuff like that. I mean, from first starting off being 4,000 or 5,000 square feet. Now we're close to 45,000 square feet. We're a big operation.
Can you tell us what your school is opening? Is it open now? Are you taking students? Okay.
So right now we're doing curriculum development. So we're actually about 45-50% done with the curriculum. Now it's in terms of what we want to teach. And I think what we're kind of thinking now is figuring out it's a little bit of an ethics battle, and I'll tell you why. One, I don't think anyone can be a dog trainer after 6 months. I don't think that. It takes me 18 months to build a functional trainer. Like someone that is like, I don't know anything about dogs. Okay, come here. Here's how you take care of dogs. Here's how you do the whole thing. And then progressing them to like, wow, I can.
Dude. You need to put your hands on dogs. Like, you need to see and interact with them.
So I think that's kind of the thing, that one of the final pieces that we're trying to figure out in terms of splitting up and breaking up curriculum is that, are we doing a 30-day program in a 30-day program, a 60-day program, or are we looking at what we do as more of intensive individual 1 week programs, right? Those are one concepts. Also, there's a lot of people here in Chicago. So is there an option to have like an evening school for people that want to learn about dogs, right? Kind of reflecting back on my college experience is, I went to school first thing in the morning. When I had the times of my days off during the week, I went during the day. And there's like courses that people need to take. So I may want to look at it that there will be courses that people need to take to accumulate a certain amount of credits and courses to then receive a graduating certificate, right? And so
Right.
our curriculum would run year long in terms of how to accomplish that. So that's kind of the main thing, is like, what is the best way to teach people? Because I know there's a lot of people out there with schools. Yeah, there's a few schools out there. They have 3-month programs, 6 months program. They have a 6-month, some have 6-month master dog trainer programs, and how they do that stuff. It's just like, that's not the way the human brain learns, right? Like, that's not how you myelinate things. That's not how you absorb information. And so it's very challenging to me, because we become a little bit of like dog snobs in terms of like putting your hands on dogs. So if you're gonna take someone's money to train a dog, you need to be able to achieve X, Y, and Z, right? And if you don't have those skills, then this is kind of where like my involvement of the IACP and what I've seen in terms of legislation that's tried to be passed is that, what is it called when you try to when you charge someone for goods that they did not, or services they did not properly receive? Well, that's defrauding, right? That's fraud. And so that's the whole thing, is when, and I have to look at it at the state level, because we're in Chicago. And we're in Chicago. We have a lot of eyes on what we do. There's a lot of like, eyes on what we do. The state can walk in here. The city of Chicago can walk in here. The fire department, they walk in for surprise inspections, right? How are the dogs doing? What are people doing? Like, that's just what happens in cities. And and so having the right licenses and all that kind of stuff really puts the focus on certificates and what trainers should be able to accomplish. Right. And so making sure that trainers that come out of these schools are able to achieve certain skills, and honestly being willing to fail people and being able to tell people you can't be a good dog trainer, are kind of like you can't be a trainer, or you're not ready to be a trainer yet, or you're not ready to graduate, or we're not going to graduate you. Those are like ethical challenges that come about that are kind of what we're dealing with right now in terms of how we will proceed with the school. If that makes sense.
Well, we fail. I mean, it reminds me too of like when we're looking for slow, concentrated standard of what we're supposed to be doing with the relationship as a teacher, right? There's expectations that are reliant on you knowing what you're doing. And I like the module of courses. I like that, because not only it's also upkeep, and it's also continued learning, right? For people, because I tell people there's no finish line here, folks. Like, even if you have your certificate, whether if it's from National Canine, Tom Rose, Star Mark, or any of these schools, which are great. I mean, but continued learning is essential. And that's one of the reasons, honestly, Fabian, of me doing these live streams is, I mean, selfishly, it's for me. So I could continue learning from you and everybody else that I've talked to. But anybody that has gained knowledge by watching, like, we can be, we can have harmony in talking about dogs, because in the end of the day, we're all in this for the benefit of these animals.
Oh, 100%. Yeah.
Right. And 2, if you can learn something or find a teacher that I can direct you to somebody that I respect and want to learn from myself, and that carries your understanding to the next level, dude, that's why I'm all in it. And that's why I do these for free. But if you do want to join my Patreon page, I'll put a link in the comments below. So that's my first, but that's why I do these, man. It's like, look, I love the idea of modules. I'll take a module myself as somebody that's worked in this for almost 20 years here in Seattle, and a lot of my life I've worked with dogs. That's why I went to Silver School. That's why I go to the IACP. Like, truth be told, I have never been a member of IACP. But I've gone to them since 2010, 2009. I've gone to all these conferences because of the networking.
Oh yeah, dude, it's great.
Opportunities, and to get myself around, great teachers. But I can see big value in that. And then I want to encourage you to really just hone down and niche out some of these courses, right? So people can have a good understanding of what they're getting into, but also have the standards, not just of their dogs, but of themselves, of what do I need to know here.
Because I think I think, and here's, I'll let it out. This is kind of like, I'll let the cat out of the bag. Cause what I was thinking and likely what will happen is that there will be a longer online modules and then being here on site for a longer program. But what we're doing here is like hands-on stuff every day, right? Like for hands-on stuff every day to complement what we were doing. I think that kind of works best because most of the time it's just like, okay, so I feel like I've accumulated certain skills. How do you make sure that other people experience those skills and develop those skills without having to experience all the bad, right? Because the bad's unsafe, the bad's people getting bit, the bad's like, catching dogs getting hurt, people getting hurt, especially in the higher end of drive or specifically around things that people are interested in. Because a lot of people are interested in protection sports. A lot of people are interested in the behavior cases. Everyone's interested in, if done well, there's a lot to learn. But if done poorly, people get hurt. People never want to, do it again. And it just hurts the industry. If people and dogs get hurt, it just hurts everyone that's involved in the industry, So we have to be careful of that.
I call it borrowing scars. Right. And that's why you learn from the OGs. That's like George Cockrell was here earlier. Like we have a lot of people showing up. And that's what I love about these is that we have people that are tried and true. George has been training dogs since longer than I've been alive. I have scars on my hands, man, that if somebody can borrow these scars that I've gotten from moving too quickly with an animal, not recognizing the body language. Then I've turned this shit into gold in a way. Like I've made it so somebody has used my negative experience or my trauma to their benefit so they don't repeat the cycle. And that's truly learning.
Right, for sure. But yeah, man, that was the short version of the story. I mean, like I said, there's just so many of them. I mean, when you're in the industry this long and you're kind of like in a accelerator here because of the flow and the demand, that there's just so much to share. That's why, I love doing these. I love doing the live, and I appreciate you motivating me to do one because you get so obsessed with like, what is that? We got to do this and do that. And you just tinker away and build things that, you got to take time to do these kind of things. They're fun. And I love sharing information. I love learning, and I love like coaching people. That's a thing that I've next chapter of my life. So I'm very excited about it.
Well, dude, you're good at it. And I appreciate you and taking the time, Fabian, today. Now, what's the best way for people to get a hold of you? If they want to learn about the school or what you're up to?
The email is probably the best way. That's Fabian@dogtribe.com. Pretty straightforward. That's the go-to email. I keep everything in my inbox, and sometimes text messages slow down, but emails, I always make sure I get back to each one of them. So and then I'll be to plug in a couple of things. We have obviously the ICP conference that's going to be in Savannah, Georgia. That's if people go to icpdogs.org, you have the lineup of speakers from Dr. Patrick Hilliard to so many great people there. That is just fun to network. There's a great learning experience. This year's going to be a blast in Savannah. It's going to be hot, but AC and a lot of pool time. And dude, how fun it is to be there with the trainers. Like last year I was running a lot of audio and video stuff at conference, and this year we're going to have interviews with podcasts. We'll have some of our team down there. It was really fun. So I didn't get to have as much fun last year, but this year I'm going to make the time for it. But they get so fun, from networking events at the bar to you name it, right? It's great. And then I'm going to be speaking at the Working Dog conference in June. I think it's in Nashville, Tennessee. So I'll be speaking at that one. I'll be covering the learning theory portion. And they said, try to cover it in a way that it's not boring. And I'm like, I love that. There's a lot of really good modern stuff that applies to, just working dog handlers in terms of that. So if people are going to those, please stop by, say hi. I'm a super social person, love talking to people, especially if during those times, if there's a drink involved, even more, right? But dude. Yeah. Are you going to be in Savannah this year? Are you going?
I'm planning on it. I haven't got my tickets yet. As soon as I do, I'll let you know. And I've been chatting with Greg Van Kuren from e-collar technologies, and we're talking about getting a nice big Airbnb if we're not staying at the site. That's what we usually do. He's one of my best friends.
Oh, cool. Yeah.
We've traveled a lot together. I've been to Costa Rica a number of times with him, and so we're planning on it, man. We're planning on it, and unless something comes up, but I don't foresee it. It's still plenty of time, you guys, to lock down your tickets. July, it's 28th through like August 1st, and there are some pre-events too, right? There's like a day before. We have one site that's one option on site and one option off site. And so,
yeah, these are like for people that are showing up to conference. Everybody shows up a day before or 2 days prior to get settled in. And so there are pre-conference options. So people can, there's options on site, which is like defensive handling by one of our board members, Enlightened Dogs. He's pretty good. Working with fearful dogs, clicker training, CPR first aid. And then there's an option too, which is bar hunt demonstration. So yeah, these things get real fun. And then here in Chicago, we have Cameron Ford next month, actually.
I can't wait. I'm going to be actually out of the country during that time, but I saw that and I was just like, oh man, I got to go. But unfortunately, I want to learn from him. I love the nose end of the dog and nerding out on that stuff. And then too, if we might do an episode, if I can arrange it with you, Jacqueline, and maybe Justin or somebody that is, we'll do an IACP where we talk about who's going to be speaking, and take any questions from people that I've been to so many of these conferences that it's one not to miss. It's just a great time to kind of just hang out and shake hands and get to know everybody, your colleagues. So highly recommended, you guys.
Right. And so that's with Cameron, he's doing the scent, I think troubleshooting, like a scent detection troubleshooting workshop. The one I'm really interested in, because I asked him he spoke at conference 2 years ago. I asked him to do what do you call it? The canine cognition workshop. That was cool. That one's cool. I actually wasn't able to sit in on it when at conference. So I was like, hey, let's bring it to Chicago and do it. That's the canine cognition workshop there.
These are the seminars, man. You're getting on it, dude. I have it written down, but I forgot seminar review. So results-driven detection, Halloween bash. That sounds great.
That was really fun. These are, I think, some of the ones that we got a list one. There's actually one specifically that's going to be focused on dog socialization that I am specifically really excited to teach, because I see a lot of stuff on socials about dog socialization. But now for me, I love teaching that, and a lot of people need it. And so I wanted to teach one specifically and how to, kind of my background teaching pit bulls how to socialize, and how do we apply it in a way that's like, foolproof, prevent people from getting injured and stuff like that. So I'm excited for that one. There's gonna be a whole new redone on the website. I found one too, because apparently there's some broken links there.
Yeah.
Cool.
Yeah, the broken IG unfound. That's what I wrote down right here too.
Yeah.
So. Awesome, brother. Well, let's say goodbye to everybody here, and then I'll say goodbye to you in the studio, okay?
All right, sounds good. All right, thanks everyone for tuning in.
Thank you, guys. Check out my Patreon page, and we'll see you hopefully in Savannah, Georgia.